Chapter 1. If he had known that he would travel through time, Linde would never have helped his sister play another Otome game. Instead, he would have chosen a comfortable farming game like Rune Workshop or Stardew Valley. Even if it didn't work, he would have chosen something with a science fiction theme. At least it is guaranteed to enjoy future technology, instead of running away with a group of refugees like now. Linde traveled through time and into the last game he played before his death. This is a standalone Otome game with a fantasy medieval background. It stands out because of its very deep combat system. Of course, Linde would not touch an Otome game even if he was out of the industry, but it was precisely because the combat system was so deep that Linde, an old girl who likes to play Otome games, couldn't push it away, so he just put it on vacation. After returning home, Linde came to practice in the modern era to get all the achievements. Then, as expected, something unexpected happened. After Linde cleared the Otome game, he sacrificed his life out of righteousness when he went out to bask in the sun, and traveled to the last game world he played during his lifetime. The good news is that Linde has inherited all the attributes of the protagonist in the original pass save and can use all the skills of the heroine. The bad news is that the heroine's skills are all auxiliary skills. She can't walk without teammates. The only useful skill is making holy water, but this skill not only requires a bunch of materials, but also skill CD and other skills. The difference is that it is calculated based on the number of days and can only be used once a month. For Linde now, it is somewhat useless. Not only that, the heroine's upper limit is level 49, which is a 4th level professional. This level is very embarrassing. The 5th and 6th level high-level professionals who are a little higher up are somewhat capable of operating long Aotian. The 2nd and 3rd level professionals from level 4 down, even they know that they are at the level of ordinary people and have little strength. But at level 4, I can't move up or down, so I'm stuck here. Another good news is that Linde did not directly travel to the heroine, but to a little lord with the same name as himself. The second brother was saved. Another bad news is that the territory of the original owner of this body has just been captured by the demons on the border, and he has become a glorious landless viscount. Now he is fleeing in panic with the people under the cover of the border army. Life is so unpredictable. Linde sat on a tree stump around the camp and sighed about life. Because he lost his territory and had no acquaintances in this world, Linde could only lead his fellow citizens to flee south. Have one. A middle-aged soldier with unshaven beard and a hooligan air came to Linde and handed him a long loaf of bread. That was the border army officer who escorted Linde out. His name was Lori. Although he was an officer, he was a full-fledged soldier. He thought about waiting to die every day to protect Linde and his subjects from retreating. It was just to eat and drink with the little Lord Linde along the way. Thanks. Linde took the bread and almost broke his teeth after taking one bite. Lori burst out laughing when he saw this, and then showed Linde the correct way to eat it. I saw Lori knocking the baguette hard against a stone next to it. The baguette broke into 2 pieces on the spot. Lori just picked up the broken pieces and ate them. Can this be used as a weapon? Linde looked at the bread in his hand in surprise. Lori was not an ordinary soldier. There must be something for a soldier to be an officer. Lori was a 2nd level professional. If he had hit someone without a belt, ordinary enemies wearing helmets can probably be hit directly in the head. In the previous life, I just heard that the bread in the West was very hard, but I didn't expect it to be so hard. Or was it that in the fantasy world, the bread was even strengthened? However, Linde just complained. After all, Linde himself knows the current situation best. Everything that can be sold has been sold for food, but if we don't find a new territory, I'm afraid everyone won't be able to hold on for long. But now the kingdom has long passed the development period, and all the territory has been divided up. Even the wasteland nominally belongs to the Grand Duke of each territory. Just like the northern border where Linde is now, if he does not get the Grand Duke of the northern territory, without permission, it is illegal to open up wasteland privately, which means that not only does Linde not have the noble start like other colleagues, he cannot even open up wasteland. I have seen someone using bread as a weapon in the royal capital. His Majesty the King even named that guy a breadstick knight. After speaking, Lori gestured with the half section of the breadstick in his hand, seemingly imitating the guy he saw using the breadstick as a weapon. Have you ever been to the royal capital? Linde looked at Lori with some disbelief. After all, although this guy was reliable in his work, his words were always wrong. Of course, didn't I say that before? Before I was hit by an arrow in the knee, I was a well-known mercenary in the kingdom. I even rode a dragon. Although Lori said this, no one took him seriously. After all, aren't the famous mercenaries all high-level professionals? How could he be an old cunning guy with only the 2nd level? But this time, Linde did not joke with Lori as usual and laugh at him for bragging again. Instead, he asked solemnly, did you hear any gossip when you arrived in the capital? For example, the church announced a new appointment. A saint, or a prince changed his fiancé copyright or something. These questions are very important to Linde now, because it has been impossible to confirm which timeline in the game it is now since Linde traveled to this world. After all, in this magically modified Middle Ages, the speed of information circulation cannot be said to be as slow as that of the original Middle Ages, it can only be said to be basically non-existent, and the plot of the game mainly takes place in the royal capital, and border matters are not mentioned at all, so Linde is now I have no idea how far the heroine has progressed. If the heroine has not enrolled in the royal capital yet, she can hug the thigh of the destined girl. It was 2 years ago that I went to the capital. After speaking, Lori pretended to think deeply. 2 years ago, His Royal Highness, the 4th Prince Crane Augustine, who was called the future king, did have a big fight with his fiancée copyright the granddaughter of our Grand Duke of the North, Rena Lars. At that time, the whole city was in turmoil. Even I, a mercenary who just entered the city, knows about it, although I don't know why everyone in the city cares about this quarrel. Because this is an otome game. Linde complained in his mind. It's still the kind of early otome game where the male protagonist shows up and a bunch of little girls appear out of nowhere and start narrating while being nymphomaniacs. Not to mention the quarrel, the whole city will probably know what the hero had for breakfast in the afternoon, and maybe the same breakfast is already on sale. The incident Lori mentioned probably refers to the fact that the heroine attended the ball of the hero Crane Augustine at the end of the first year of school, which caused the hero's first wife Linde Lars to become furious. So the time now should just be when the heroine graduated and became a saint, and the villainous heroine Linde Lars was exiled to the border because she attacked the royal family at the graduation ceremony. In the end, the Lars family strongly opposed it. The change from exile to marriage was changed, but it was not said which unlucky nobleman she was married to. Why? Linde sighed deeply. The heroine had already become a saint. It seemed that he could not hug the heroine's lap. Chapter 2. As the saying goes, there is no perfect way to go. When Linde and Lori were already considering whether to turn into bandits directly, a messenger from the royal capital found Linde. The messenger got off a luxurious carriage inlaid with sapphires. The two-headed lion emblem on the carriage, which represented the royal family, made Linde have to kneel down and salute according to etiquette. But the envoy in blue robe hurriedly stepped forward to support Linde, and at the same time, he held Linde's hand cordially and started talking. Viscount Linde Roll, I had a hard time looking for you. Ever since I heard that your territory was breached, I didn't dare to stop for a moment, so I found you here. Fortunately, the goddess has blessed you, and you are fine. The enthusiastic attitude of the envoy made Linde a little confused. Could it be that he was an illegitimate son of some royal family who was living abroad? The original owner did not mention this in his memory. Why was the envoy from the royal capital so enthusiastic? Your Majesty the envoy, you might as well tell me what you have to say. I also want to lead my subjects to find a place where they can settle down. The envoy from the royal capital clapped his hands and said directly, Oh, isn't this a coincidence? Your Excellency, the Viscount, I am here to give you territory. Linde was startled when he heard this. Could it be that he was really the illegitimate son of the royal family? Impossible. Then Linde saw the royal messenger take out a scroll from his arms and said to Linde, Your Excellency, Viscount, I have good news. Guess what it is? Is it because I suddenly have a father I've never met before? The messenger shook his head with a smile. I have a title and I want to go to the royal capital to inherit it. The messenger still shook his head with a professional smile. That is. Linde suddenly had an ominous premonition. Congratulations, Viscount Linde Roll, after the unanimous decision of the Holy Lady and Grand Duke Lars, you will be the grandson-in-law of the Lars family. Then the messenger slowly opened the scroll in his hand, and it turned out to be a marriage book. And above it, Linde's fiancé copyright E is clearly written as Rena Lars. What? I marry Rena? Really or not? Linde almost spurted out a mouthful of old blood, and the unlucky border noble at the end of the game was actually him? The envoy from the royal capital on the side was still comforting Linde and said, Don't be nervous. It's normal to feel dizzy. Take a deep breath. I call you Lao Mu. Although Linde wanted to say this, he still showed a smile that was uglier than crying and asked, Sir Messenger, do we have to dissolve this marriage? It's not that Lina Lars is so ugly that she can be chosen as the prince's concubine because of her good looks. It's just that in the game's future talks, Lina Lars was mentioned. Because Si was dissatisfied with the royal family, she forced her unlucky husband to rebel, and in the end her entire family was beheaded. For Linde now, it is basically the same as being sentenced to death with a reprieve. The messenger's expression suddenly became serious, and he said to Linde in a threatening tone, Viscount Linde, that is the granddaughter of Grand Duke Lars. Have you thought about the consequences of refusing? In fact, the envoy was also a little nervous. Rena's reputation was already bad in the royal capital. Shrew and jealous women were only mildly scolded. The most common title was the shame of nobility. Just this title alone made Rena's reputation among the nobles was a death sentence. After the decision to marry down came out, the nobles in the royal capital basically avoided it. The nobles in the north also hid as far as they could, and even those young people in the northern territory of the right age got engaged overnight, because there were not enough noble ladies, and many men even eloped. The current situation in the north is very complicated, and the attitude of the nobles in the north towards Rena is even more extreme than that of the nobles in the royal capital. Therefore, the envoy is also anxious to complete the task, and it is difficult to find a villain who is willing to take over. But Linde's attitude made the envoy from the royal capital suspect that the nobles who had fled from the border had also heard some rumors, which made the envoy even more anxious. Looking at the citizens not far behind Linde who were looking over here, the envoy suddenly came up with a plan. He pointed at the contract in the marriage certificate and shouted loudly, Lord Viscount, you have to think clearly. If you refuse, all the new territory given by Grand Duke Lars will be lost, and you and your subjects will continue to wander like this. Lord Viscount, you don't want your subjects to continue to starve and wander, right? Although he wanted to persuade this envoy, who might be from the island country, to be more restrained, Linde still read the contract in the marriage certificate carefully. In the treaty, Grand Duke Lars did make it clear that he would give his grandson-in-law a large territory. Although it was uncultivated wasteland, it was also fertile land with lush water and grass. Are these really given to Linde? No, because Archduke Lars specifically noted that although Linde was the nominal lord, the donated territory was jointly managed by Linde and Reina. What a joint management, Linde despised in his heart. The treaty said it was joint management, but it is not simple for Lina Lars, the granddaughter of the Grand Duke, to find an outsider's son-in-law. This is just a disguised treaty to give land to his granddaughter. That's all. But the people behind Linde all looked at Linde with eager eyes. As long as their lord nodded, everyone would be able to settle down safely in the new territory immediately, not to mention that it was Grand Duke Lars. In the hearts of the people in the northern border, they are a nobleman greater than the emperor. The emperor cannot control matters in the northern border, but Grand Duke Lars can. What reason does his lord have to refuse? Linde knew that he had been kidnapped by morality, but after taking a deep breath, Linde still said solemnly, "Okay, Mr. Messenger, I will sign the marriage contract, but I have one more request. Our food is almost out. I hope you can provide enough food for my subjects to follow me to the new territory smoothly." "No problem, of course no problem." The messenger excitedly handed the marriage certificate to Linde. "These knights will also escort you and your subjects to the new territory gifted by Archduke Lars." Linde's request was nothing to the envoy. A meal paid by any nobleman to receive him along the way was enough to make the people behind Linde vomit. The envoy was also secretly glad that his guess was indeed correct. Nobles who can take their people to run away must have a relatively high moral standard, and this kind of nobles is the best to deal with. Hearing the people and border troops behind him start cheering, Linde suddenly felt that marrying Lina Lars was no big deal. At least he had solved the current crisis, although this was almost equivalent to selling himself. Then Linde began to read the marriage contract carefully. "What? I'm not my husband-in-law." Linde saw at the bottom of the marriage certificate that after getting married, Lina actually wanted to change her surname. From then on, she had nothing to do with the Lars family. No wonder Lina didn't react when it was said in the future that she would rebel against the Lars family. "Of course, Your Majesty the Viscount, what are you thinking about? This is a marriage, not a marriage." The envoy glanced at Linde doubtfully. Although having a son-in-law is very common in this world, and women also have the right to inherit, there are not many people who actively want to be a son-in-law. Linde reluctantly closed the marriage contract. Well, it seems that he can't smile crookedly when the Lars family shouts, "No, the Lars family's son-in-law is biting the master." Although he is not a son-in-law in name, according to the treaty, Linde's actual status after marrying Reina is not much different from that of his son-in-law. It has to be said that Grand Duke Lars unintentionally solved the eternal problem of the son-in-law devouring his master. Novel difficulties. Chapter 3. Because Grey White Collar is backed by the Titan Mountains and has a river of tears running across the territory, although it is located in a remote area, it can be considered a fertile land. This is the territory that Grand Duke Lars carefully selected for his granddaughter. It is neither too poor nor too eye-catching. It is a good place to retire. If Reina didn't become a demon, she could lie down peacefully in the territory until she died. Even after crossing the Titan mountain range, there would be the Goj Empire of the Elves. Even if the north fell one day, she could still hide if the demons really attacked. Go into the mountains and hug the lap of the elf. The only problem is that it is located in the westernmost part of the north, sparsely populated and somewhat remote. But judging from the current chaotic situation in the north, being in a remote location can avoid a lot of war. After leading Linde and his party to Grey White Collar, the envoy from the royal capital ran away with the guards without looking back, and Linde finally met his fiancé copyright whom he had seen many times in the game, for the first time. I have to say that Reina is even more beautiful in real life than in the game. Even wearing armor, you can see that she is tall and well proportioned. Her blonde hair is as dazzling as the morning light in the morning sun, and her green eyes have a clear temperament, which matches the female figure. The knight's attire is even more heroic. But it's a pity that Linde, who knew Lina's future fate, didn't have much interest in Lina. Coupled with the various restrictions in the marriage contract, although he was not a son-in-law in name, Linde was already ready to eat soft rice. Enlightenment. There is no shame in being next to a rich woman, not to mention such a beautiful little rich woman. After Linde said hello, he handed over the people he brought to Reina, and then Reina responded by arranging a personal maid for Linde. Before Reina could speak again, Linde left with the personal maid very consciously, as if he didn't intend to interfere. Although he had never eaten soft rice in his previous life, Linde still knew how to eat soft food. After all, Reina was backed by the strongest family in the north. How could Archduke Lars fail to do so? As long as he found a way to prevent Linde from letting him eat soft food, if Linde rebels, then I can probably live a peaceful life in this world that I dream of. In this way, while Linde was walking around the territory with this personal maid, he began to think about how to stop Reina from rebelling in the future. Because Grey White Collar was still a wasteland before, and Reina had just arrived at Grey White Collar, so everywhere in the territory could be seen a bunch of overseers waving whips and directing the people in the territory to work. Are you a stupid pig? Just hit the ground nails twice and you're done? If the tent blows away at night, I will stuff your head into the river of tears over there. Seeing an overseer using violent methods to urge the residents who didn't seem to know how to set up tents to fix the tents, Linde frowned slightly and asked the maid beside him unhappily, "These residents, are they all serfs?" "Not entirely." The maid began to explain in detail beside Linde. "Because I heard that the new territory needed to be reclaimed, the rich peasants and free people who owned land were unwilling to come. These people were all serfs from Lars territory, or free people who owed money to the Grand Duke and could not repay their debts." Afterwards, Linde asked some basic questions, and the maid answered them all in a clear and logical manner, allowing Linde to quickly understand the basic situation of the territory. May I have your name? Linde was a little curious. It was too humiliating for a person who knew everything about the territory to be a maid. You can just call me Lila. The maid lifted her skirt and saluted. Obviously this maid is not an ordinary person. She was probably sent by Archduke Lars to assist Reina, but it seems that this maid does not have much power. After a simple exchange, Linde realized that the reason why Lila became his personal maid was simply because she was excluded by Reina's small group. It's not that Reina doesn't know how to handle people well, but the knights brought by Reina have formed a natural interest group. Whether it's out of loyalty or selfishness, those knights don't like Lila's placement by Grand Duke Lars. People who come in. Reina didn't like it either, so she threw Lila directly to Linde. I just urged the eldest lady to work hard. After all, there are still many unresolved problems in the territory, and the eldest lady cannot rest yet. Looking at the messy territory in front of him, Linde deeply agreed with Lila's words. After all, even Linde had fled here from the northern border, but Reina, who arrived in the territory early, now had nothing set up except a few sleeping tents. Even after Linde inquired with Lila, he was surprised to find that the remaining serfs without tents actually returned to sleep on the boat at the dock at night, and this dock was built in advance by Grand Duke Lars. But when he saw the cargo ships at the dock, Linde couldn't help but sigh. Although the engagement was broken off by the royal family, Grand Duke Lars really doted on Reina. The supplies were shipped one by one. Any more ships would feel direct. The river is blocked. But because the construction work in the territory is progressing too slowly, a large amount of materials on the ship have not even had time to start unloading. The good news is that supplies are so abundant that even serfs can be allocated tents to live in. The bad news is that tents are still being made. With such management ability, do you still want to rebel in the future? Linde really doesn't know who gave Lina the courage when she rebelled. It couldn't be Liang Jingru, right? Although Linde couldn't bear it when he saw the serfs being beaten with whips by the overseers, he couldn't say anything more. After all, he was just a freeloader. But when he saw that the people he brought with him were also whipped twice by the supervisor, and even the border soldiers he brought were whipped by the supervisor, Linde finally couldn't help it anymore, and stood up directly to come to the supervisor. One kick. What the hell are you doing? Do you urge people to work like you do? Are you in charge of the people I brought here? The supervisor wanted to get up and retort that if he didn't do it, others would do it, but his attitude immediately became respectful when he saw that Linde was followed by Reina's maid. Master, I won't smoke. These people don't know how to be lazy. I also want to make the territory better as soon as possible. At this time, many of Reina's knights heard the movement and looked over. Although these knights didn't say anything, they just looked at each other as warnings, but Linde couldn't do anything more. He could only pick out the old, weak, women and children in his territory and place them separately. These old people and children had gone through a lot. It was already very difficult to escape here, and Linde didn't want his fellow citizens who had managed to survive to be beaten to death. At this moment, Linde finally realized how backward Lina's management system was. To say it was feudalism was an overestimation. It was considered slavery at best. With such a territory, is it really possible to rebel in the future? Chapter 4. How does Lina perform in the original plot? For someone like Linde, who has never watched female videos or played other otome games, it's really hard to explain. It's okay to go to the heroine to fight after being provoked. As a prince and concubine trained with all the efforts of the Lars family, she doesn't have any courtship. She has 0 IQ in Gongdo and just spends the whole day wandering around the fourth prince stupidly. Rather than saying she is a villainous daughter, she is more like a silly sweetheart who was tricked by the royal family hiding behind the scenes and became a victim of political strife. The only thing worth mentioning is that as the last boss of the battle system, Reina's unreasonable force value. You must know that the highest level in the original game is only level 49, but Lina is a level 65 boss. A 4th level professional is already a genius in this world, but genius is only the threshold for meeting Lina, and Lina is still very young. Are you envious? In exchange for your IQ. How could the crown prince's concubine be changed just because the prince didn't like it? Moreover, Reina is the granddaughter of the largest noble in the kingdom. Judging from the clues in the game, Reina was completely suppressed by the royal family. Will be reduced to the end of marriage. Without the royal family behind the scenes, it would be impossible for the heroine to connect with so many nobles in the palace, no matter how lucky she was. However, Lina in the story was completely unaware of this. She simply believed that the heroine had robbed her fiancé copyright, and after being sold, she was still helping the royal family count the money, and she even wanted the royal family to do justice for her. It is estimated that Grand Duke Lars also noticed this, so he arranged Reina to a remote place, hoping that his granddaughter could live with an honest person without disaster or illness. The next morning, Linde got up early under the service of Lila, experienced the decadence of the aristocratic class, and then went to find Reina. After all, the marriage contract stated joint management. Even if Linde was just watching from the side, he still had to sit in the Lord's tent. What's more, yesterday's slavery-like system was still fresh in Linde's memory. If this continued, let alone rebellion, the territory is probably going to self-destruct. After saying the same simple hello as yesterday, Linde came to Reina's side. It must be said that although Reina looks very busy, she is dealing with trivial matters most of the time. The current system of the camp, or there is no system at all, the current situation is that some knights will help Reina directly manage the people, some knights will manage the overseers, and some knights will do nothing and follow Reina be around to help with things. And those so-called affairs are also big and small. The big ones include how to arrange the cargo unloaded from the ship, the small ones include how deep to nail the ground nails for tents, and where to set up tents. There are even how to reclaim wasteland. Ask Lina for permission. But Lina's handling can be said to be a mess. Even the previous night came to confirm with Lina what goods to move today. After a person was separated, Lina forgot. When another night came to ask Lina what goods to move today. When picking up the goods, Reina gave a completely different answer without thinking. Looking at Reina, who was in a hurry, Linde finally understood why the management of the territory was so abstract. Finally, when Lina made another stupid mistake and assigned a serf to 2 knights to manage, Linde, who couldn't bear it anymore, stepped in to remind Lina. In this way, Linde has been sitting in Reina's tent, watching Reina deal with the so-called official business, and from time to time, like the old man in the park who is behind the chess game, pointing and constantly picking out Reina. Error. Linde promised that he really didn't mean it. In his previous life, he was also a true gentleman who watched the chess game without saying a word. But Reina is not a bad chess player. She uses the cannon as a chariot and the horse as a cannon. If she continues like this, the chessboard will be ruined. I have to turn it over first. In the end, Reina also suppressed her blush, looked at the official documents piled higher and higher on the table, and said to Linde, "How about you come? Miss Lars, I'm just giving you some advice, I don't mean to." Before Linde finished speaking, he saw Reina's determined eyes and suddenly realized that Reina was serious. "Really, let me come?" Linde asked tentatively. "Otherwise? Aren't you the lord? If you didn't come, I would have done these things, and if you came, I would have to do these things. So aren't you here in vain?" Reina directly spread her hands and looked at Linde inexplicably. What Linde didn't know was that although Reina had been trained as a prince and concubine since childhood, the main training direction was etiquette. Territory management, a compulsory course for ordinary nobles, Reina had never learned at all, so Grand Duke Lars what was written in the marriage certificate was joint management instead of giving full power to Reina. It's just that in terms of etiquette, Reina's talent is similar to her management level. The reason why she passed the etiquette class is because the teacher spanked Reina's butt with a board when the board was cracked. The etiquette teacher broke through and gave it to her. Lina passed. What Reina really wants to do is to lead the knights on the battlefield. The knights Reina brought are also Reina's loyal fans. They just want to come to the border to kill demons and make military achievements all day long, instead of dealing with these paperwork. It's just that these knights will naturally protect Reina's power, and what happened in the capital makes these knights very exclusive. Hearing Reina's answer, Linde almost spit out blood. Could it be that Reina took everything written in the marriage certificate seriously, and she actually regarded herself as a lord? CO author, I thought so much yesterday that I was fighting against the air. You can't blame Linde for not thinking about it, because Grand Duke Lars designed it like this, but it's obvious that Grand Duke Lars also underestimated the innocence of his granddaughter. Reina, who was just like a blank piece of paper, didn't realize that she was this person. The real owner of the territory. But this also gave Linde some ideas. Then I want to forgive the debts of the serfs and free people, is it okay? It's not worth a lot of money in the first place. I have no intention of asking those people to pay back the money. What about the overseers? Those supervisors are so annoying. They come to me to report no matter how big the issue is. Why don't you just let them come to you from now on? I don't want to take care of it a long time ago. What about those knights? When asked about the knights, Reina finally had a reaction on her face and said, "Don't worry about those knights, I still have to take them hunting." After hearing this answer, Linde finally felt relieved. Reina not only gave herself all the power in the territory, but also pulled away the knights who might not obey Linde's command. She really made me cry to death. Chapter 5. Linde, who had just obtained the power of the Lord, was not in a hurry to deal with the large amount of paperwork. Instead, he first found Lori, a veteran who had followed him along the way. Because Lori is a second-level professional, those knights have a good attitude towards Lori. After this guy came to the territory, he started fishing, making jokes with Lina's knights, and even became a celebrity among the knights. When Linde called someone to shake Lori over, this guy was not very happy and said he wanted to go with the knights. But finally came over. Is following those noble knights that interesting? Linde's face was full of helplessness, and since the time was relatively short, Linde could still get people to come over. Maybe after 2 days, these knights would regard Lori as one of their own. At least you don't have to be whipped. Lori found a stool and sat down lazily. The two had become familiar with each other on the way to escape. They were old friends and neither had any heirs. So Linde stopped chatting and said directly, "First, let everyone in the territory stop what they are doing, let your border troops take over the management, and register everyone's name, age, and age. Profession. If conditions permit, household registration will also be compiled." Linde had done simple registration with Lori when he took the people to flee, but Lori complained, "Hey, Lord, simple registration is okay, but those veterans who make household registers are not so good. If you can do it, household registration is not just a matter of just registering your name like before, and most of the border soldiers are illiterate, only a few of them can read and write." Linde looked at Li Law next to him and replied, "This maid lady will lead the maids to assist you. There is no need to be as detailed as other nobles. Now we have to figure out how many households there are in the territory. That's it." Reina didn't need so many maids, so Linde simply brought the entire maid team over and gave it to Lila to manage, because most of these aristocratic maids were literate and were natural service personnel, who could not serve anyone. Service? Why not just throw it away and serve the people? Then Linde continued to command as if he had already made plans. Also, let everyone except Miss Lars's knights gather at the river bank tomorrow morning. I have something to announce. After saying that, Linde was ready to get up and leave. Then what are you going to do? Lori looked at Linde, who was about to leave the Lord's tent, and asked curiously. I want to see what resources Grand Duke Lars has given to his precious granddaughter. Linde picked up a list full of supplies on his desk, and then muttered, I also need to figure out how to set up a tent. After everything was arranged, Linde looked at the list in his hand and sighed. The Zhu family's wine and meat stink. Because Rena ran away with the knights, the transfer of power was very smooth. After all, Linde was the nominal lord, and no one would refuse the request for a day off. It's just that registration is troublesome. Except for Rena's knights, most of the knights in the territory are ordinary people. There are not many literate people, because they have to make up household registers, and the people brought by Linde also need to be re-registered. Fortunately, the maids are still responsible. After all, for these maids who sell themselves to noble families, the most terrifying thing is whether they are busy or not. Registering household registration for civilian refugees is not an unacceptable thing for these maids, because it is a serious job after all. Any gossip in the maid circle is much more perverted than this. After the nobles got tired of playing with the maids, they would throw them away. Refugees are nothing new in this circle. There were several serfs who didn't have names along the way, so Lori had to rub the back of his head and randomly pick out a few funny names. After those serfs got their names, they kissed Lori's boots to thank him. Lori also looked down upon Lila. His eyes calmly accepted the kisses from these serfs. Linde was even busier than the two of them. Due to Rena's chaotic management, the numerous supplies had long been in disarray. He had to get on the ship in person to see which ship carried which supplies. Moreover, setting up a tent was more tiring than Linde imagined, and even the standards for setting up tents were slightly different due to different terrains. With the guidance and help of the supervisor, Linde completely set up a large tent by himself. After doing all this, it was almost evening, and Rena finally returned with her knights, carrying 2 pheasants in her hand. How is the work going, Lord? Rena took off her helmet as she walked into the tent, and the glistening sweat dispersed along with her beautiful blonde hair. Although her head was sweating profusely, Rena was obviously very excited. It had been a long time since she had brought her with her like this. The knights rode their horses to their heart's content, and even had the mood to tease Linde after they came back. It sucks. Linde, who was still writing something under the oil lamp, put down his quill and said to Rena with a straight face, what you did before was a complete mess. Everyone eats differently every day and works differently. The people who are setting up tents today will be assigned to unload the goods the next day, and then they will go to build fences the next afternoon. And the standards you require for clearing land and setting up tents every day are also different, even for the goods that need to be unloaded every day. No, the same. There are even 3 overseers and 2 knights managing 1 serf at the same time. You might as well do nothing. Probably because he was really annoyed by Rena's previous messy management, Linde changed his previous groveling manner and began to become more assertive. Faced with Linde's criticism, Rena turned her face away and whistled with an embarrassed look on her face. In fact, Rena also knew that she had done a terrible job in managing the territory these days. Hundreds of people had not been settled yet. She often forgot the instructions given in the morning and the afternoon, and then was reminded by the night the next day that it was inappropriate and immediately changed them. Turning away was Lena's last stubbornness. Looking at Rena, who turned away, Linde calmed down. After all, the person in front of him was his thigh and financial sponsor father, and scolding him would not make the territory better. But the most important thing is that Linde saw that Rena actually listened to her complaints and turned her head away, which showed that she was still somewhat ashamed and knew that she did not do very well. Rena is indeed the same as in the game, clear and a little stupid. As long as her original fiancé copyright, the 4th Prince Crane Augustine, is not involved, Rena still knows the priorities of the matter. However, Linde did not expect that Rena, the eldest daughter of the Lars family, would not be able to manage the territory at all. Miss Lars, because Grand Duke Lars's treaty states that we jointly manage the territory, there is something I need to tell you. Regarding the supplies on the dock, I need to transfer some of them first. Is that okay? Later, Linde handed the list of supplies he had made to Rena. Rena just glanced at it symbolically and said guiltily, no problem, Lord, you can use whatever supplies you want. After returning the list to Linde, Rena shook the pheasant in her hand and said, Lord, calm down and eat my chicken. Chapter 6. The next morning, Linde got up early and came to the temporarily built high platform by the river. At this time, everyone in the territory was crowded under the high platform, waiting for the Lord who had never seen him before to speak. Rena did not run away with the knights like before, but stood aside to see what Linde planned to do. Standing on the high platform, Linde was a little bit embarrassed. Originally, Linde had a lot of plans for the future, but he never thought that he would gain power so easily. Then the next task would be very simple. While developing the territory, he should avoid Lina pulled herself to ribble. However, Linde was a little confused about the mention of Rena in the future conversation that she would ribble. After spending the past 2 days together, Rena's mind really didn't look like someone who would ribble. Hello fellow citizens, although many of you may have never seen me, I want to tell you that I am your lord. From today on, everyone will follow my orders. Hearing Linde's words, many of the knights around Rena were in commotion. To them, Rena is the real owner of this land. Although you, Linde, are a lord in name, you are actually just a lord. Just a working son-in-law. If the identity in Linde's marriage certificate is really that of the adopted son-in-law, these knights may have started shouting, "No, the Lars family's adopted son-in-law has eaten the master." Lina stretched out her hand to stop the restless knights around her. Linde and Lina chatted for a long time last night. Although Lina fell asleep not long after Linde opened his mouth, Lina still vaguely remembered what Linde said about politics. The second gate. If authority is dispersed, there will be no prestige. If government orders cannot be formulated uniformly, they will easily contradict each other. Lina actually didn't understand it very well, but no matter what, it was too late for Lina to be happy that someone was helping to manage the territory. Today, I came to Grey Collar just for 3 things. First, I declare in the name of the Lord that all debts involving the lords in the territory, including Grand Duke Lars and Miss Lars, will be cancelled. No matter why you came to this place, whether you are serfs or free people, starting from today, you will no longer bear any debts to the Lord and the Lars family. The cheers and long live that were originally imagined did not appear, because for these indebted serfs and free people, high debts were no different. Archduke Lars knew that they could not afford to pay them back, but in fact he could not pay them back. No one came to collect the debt. Ironically, these debts, which were impossible to repay for serfs and freedmen, were only a fraction of her pocket money in Lina's eyes. Many of the people brought by Linde owed money to the original owner of Linde's body. However, because both Linde and the original owner were relatively lenient lords, Linde was pardoned. Their debts were not surprising to Linde's original subjects. Second point, all serfs in grey and white collars have the opportunity to become free citizens. From now on, I will issue a series of tasks and work. As long as you complete these tasks and work as required, you can obtain corresponding work points, and these work points after meeting the criteria, you can apply to become a free citizen. There began to be commotion among the crowd, mainly among the people who were brought out by Linde from his original territory, because they were more convinced of Linde, a lord who was willing to take his people to escape. But the serfs of the Lars family did not believe it, and most of them were relatively indifferent. It is not that no lords have done it before to convert serfs into freemen, but most of them have extremely harsh conditions and are basically a pie-in-the-sky type. Only a few serfs who have become the confidants of the nobles can become freemen. However, the importance of trust became apparent at this time. The veteran Lorien inserted among the people immediately asked Linde, "Lord, what are the specific tasks? How long will it take me to become a free citizen?" Linde smiled and tried his best to be approachable. Perhaps Linde inherited some of the heroine's skills as well as her charm. In the eyes of everyone, Linde did have an approachable temperament, which made Linde what he said next added a little more credibility. The main tasks and jobs include building bridges, paving roads, and building houses. Those who are physically strong can also choose to mine and join the future army. These work points are more. And for women, children, and people with poor health, there are also fishing and textiles. This is a relatively easy task. I swear in the name of the goddess that any hard-working serf can become a free citizen after working hard for about 1 to 3 years. And for those who have made significant contributions to the territory, I will personally burn the slave deed and grant him the title of a free man identity. After hearing the specific work content and swearing in the name of the goddess, the serfs of the Lars family finally began to whisper. These are things they can do, rather than killing a villain like other nobles. Long's fake conditions, at least, seem to be really feasible. At this time, Tuo in the audience began to ask questions again. Can we, the free people, also do these tasks? Of course, anyone can do these tasks. After completion, there will be corresponding work points, which can be exchanged for food and items in the territory, or directly exchanged for money. If the points of the free person reach the standard, there will be additional points. Honorarium award. Then Linde added, I have sent people to post notices about the specific system and terms in the center of the territory. There will be literate people taking turns to explain to you. If there are people who don't understand, they can go to the center of the territory to learn more in their free time. After Linde finished speaking, the first people who went to the center of the territory to learn about the system were not the serfs, but the knights around Reina. I saw the female knight next to Reina running back panting and saying to Reina, Miss, this guy really plans to turn serfs into free people. I took a look, if it's like us this kind of knight can reach the standard of becoming a free citizen in just half a year. Reina was a little puzzled and asked doubtfully, isn't this good? Is there anything wrong with turning serfs into free citizens? Perhaps because of Reina's clear stupidity, she did not realize what serfs meant to the nobles. She just put herself in the shoes of the serfs. If she were a serf, she would definitely try her best to become a free citizen. Miss. The female knight said anxiously, if all the serfs become freemen, and neither the serfs nor the freemen owe money, who will work for the territory? In my opinion, this Linde roar is very important to the management of the territory. Totally clueless. To the aristocratic class, serfs meant cheapness, which meant they could be exploited at will until the last drop of blood was drained from the serfs. And these nobles who only knew how to continuously increase taxes and working hours to collect wealth were completely unable to understand the benefits of liberating the serfs. Lina couldn't understand either, but Lina showed amazing wisdom and ability to think from other people's perspective. Susan Knight, are you a serf? Of course not. Miss, I am a noble knight of the Lars family. The knight named Susan didn't seem to understand why Rena suddenly started asking this. Then do you owe our family money? No, you and your family have always been very good to me, and I have never had any debts. Then why do you work for me? Susan was stunned when she heard Lena's deafening question. It took a long time before she said some difficult words such as the knight's faith and the family's honor. Then why can't serfs have faith and honor? I think the Lord has done nothing wrong. Those who can persist in completing those tasks are already qualified to become freemen or even knights. After hearing what Reina said, Susan finally stopped and retorted, but miss, we are nobles, with noble blood flowing through our bodies, and those serfs are just slaves. What's that? Reina said nonchalantly, Grandpa also said that the ancestors of our Lars family were still blacksmiths. Chapter 7. As for the third point. Linde looked at the shrunken serfs and said, the tents and fences to be built today are the first tasks I have announced. Although there are no supervisors, I have already asked you to divide them into groups and arrange them. The work scope of each group is determined, and the work is completed only when it meets my requirements. Facing the confused people in the audience, Linde continued, the first 5 groups who finish the work first can eat meat tonight. The eyes of the serfs, who were still a little confused before, suddenly sparkled with light. Meat, how long has it been since you had meat? Even if it is not during the war, it is not easy for civilians to eat a meal of meat, let alone the chaos in the north. In the eyes of these serfs, only real nobles can afford meat. The most important thing is that what Linde said was not about drawing a pie out of thin air, but that you can eat it tonight, you can do it tonight. Many people licked the corners of their mouths unconsciously, and the crowd was even a little commotion, wanting to ask which group they were in and what their scope of work was. Linde gradually breathed a sigh of relief as he looked at the people whose eyes were gradually igniting hope. He now needed something similar to Shang Yang's establishment of a tree to establish his prestige, and now it seems that he has succeeded more than half of it. Amid the increasingly agitated crowd and louder discussions, Linde continued, starting from today, those who participate in heavy work every day can have an extra meal in the morning. There will be frontier soldiers at the place where breakfast is distributed. The soldiers tell you about your group and the scope of today's work. Remember, you are not allowed to rob the daily meals. Those who rob will sit together in the group and will not be allowed to participate in the next day's work. Those who do not change their behavior will be disqualified from working. As a demonstration, everyone will have an additional breakfast today, and soldiers will guide you to the place where breakfast is distributed later. After finishing speaking, Linde casually walked off the high platform with his hands behind his back. After a moment of silence, the serfs and civilians below the stage followed the soldiers and rushed to the place where breakfast was distributed while yelling. The border troops led by Lori had already cooked wheat porridge and were maintaining order at the scene. At the same time, there were many border soldiers who were elected as team leaders, holding pamphlets and shouting the names of their team members. Because of what Linde said at the end, no one dared to step forward to grab it. Not only would they lose their job, but they would also lose their future. There are even timid serfs who don't even dare to speak loudly even though they are so hungry that they just follow closely behind their team leader and wait for the porridge, for fear that they will be revoked for breaking the rules. Job qualifications. Li La was a little embarrassed when she looked at these well-organized serfs. Although Li La already knew what Linde was going to do beforehand, and some things were even arranged by Li La herself, but before she saw it, she would only use the whip. The serfs who were trying to be lazy below spontaneously began to obey the order, and Li La still felt an incredible power. Will these people be lazy again in the future? Li La doesn't know, but at least no one will deny Linde's authority again. In the evening, when dinner is approaching, take out the meat and make a pot of broth. Linde emphasized, the broth must be stewed where everyone can see it, and the meat must be enough for 5 groups of people. Do we really need to prepare for so many people? Lord. Although she had long felt that Linde was really coming, Li La still didn't believe it when she heard that Linde personally ordered it to her. Of course, I said, now the orders in the territory must be based on me. No, I'm not questioning your authority. Li La explained, what I mean is that even if it is for 5 groups of people, you only need to prepare a little meat that is about the same amount as wild fruits. Those serfs will still be grateful. Even if they don't buy it, when the time comes just say it was me. Lila, who was chosen by Grand Duke Lars to assist Reina, knew very well that it was usually difficult for the nobles themselves to explain such things openly, and someone needed to take the blame. The noble lord cannot make mistakes. The faults are all those below. When the serfs really started to make trouble, Linde could answer questions without knowing anything. It was the people below who had problems with the implementation of what I asked for in the first place. It's the meat of 5 groups of people. And Lila is now taking the initiative to take the blame. Head maid, please remember, don't speculate or interpret without authorization in the future. The amount of meat I say is the amount. Or, the supplies shipped by Archduke Lars can't even provide enough meat for 5 groups of people. Can't you take it out? At this moment, Lila felt unprecedented pressure. The who liked to be on an equal footing with you seemed to have disappeared. This was the pressure from absolute power. It didn't even have anything to do with Linde himself, but the person in power was emphasizing his respect for power. Absolute control. But this feeling quickly disappeared. After Li La's big beads of sweat fell to the ground and he nodded in agreement, Linde seemed to have turned back into the gentle lord. Looking at Li La who was going to arrange the meat, Linde shook his head helplessly. It seemed that it was still too difficult to change these people's ideas in a short while. Many government orders failed because of trying to figure out the order, and even the above all like to be the Riddler. Although this style of governance is very suitable for controlling people, it is obviously very detrimental to the early construction of the territory. Bottom line, the Riddler gets out of grey collar. Linde looked at the population list and the terrain map of the territory in his hand. Road construction and reclamation had to be planned in the future, but the population of the territory obviously could not keep up. The supplies brought by Archduke Lars were more than Linde had imagined, but most of them were for Reina to maintain a decent noble life. Linde planned to discuss with Reina later to let Archduke Lars have more luck. Bring some more practical tools, and it would be best to find a few experienced craftsmen to work on the territory. The border troops brought by Lori were completely insufficient. There were still a few literate people in the territory, but Linde did not want to use the noble knights around Lina, so using the maids brought by Lina was not an option. Why? He originally thought that with the assistance of the Lars family and his experience in his previous life, managing the territory would go smoothly. However, even though supplies were abundant and things were indeed developing smoothly, Linde still felt tired. The work point system is just a reference to the previous life, which was created temporarily in one night. It is a system in which work points and wages are parallel, which can be regarded as an alternative work for relief system. The territory has no output at all now and relies entirely on Archduke Lars to survive. Linde has no practical experience in building roads and houses, so he will only encounter more and more problems in the future. While Linde was thinking, Reina came to Linde with excited steps and said excitedly, "It's really amazing. I have never seen serfs obeying the order like this and taking the initiative to work of." Linde looked in the direction that Reina was pointing. It turned out to be several groups of serfs who were waiting in line to give out porridge. He simply urged the group leader to go to work first and come back to drink porridge after the work was done. It can be said that he gave full play to his subjective initiative. How on earth did you do it? You were able to command them without a whip at all. Looking at the chattering Reina, Linde took out a booklet and said, "This thing is much easier to use than a whip. This book records the household registration of everyone in the territory, the group they belong to, and the work points of these people." Reina flipped through 2 pages but didn't understand it. She just praised it directly, "Although I don't understand it at all, it looks so awesome. You should be the one to manage the territory." After speaking, Reina puffed up her chest proudly, as if she was also honored. But Linde directly poured cold water on him and said to Reina with the territory's planning map, "Are you still embarrassed to say that you didn't even dig drainage ditches when building the territory before? Even now there are only tents. But in a place where hundreds of people live, you don't even build a drainage system." "Drainage system? What is drainage system?" Looking at the innocent-looking Reina, Linde realized that he was playing the piano to a cow. "Okay, it's okay, just go and have fun." Seemingly reading a hint of disappointment in Linde's tone, Reina patted Linde's shoulder carelessly and said, "Oh, brother, aren't you here? Don't worry about your work. Brother, you just need to build the territory. If you have any difficulties, remember to come to me." Otherwise, Linde's evaluation of Lina is a kind of clear stupidity. In terms of being insensitive to the power in her hands, Lina is exactly the same as in the game. If it were in a certain biography, Reina would probably have to help count the money if she wouldn't survive 2 episodes. How could such a guy rebel in the future? Linde stared at Reina's heroic yet somewhat silly face and fell into deep thought. Chapter 8. In any case, grey-collar workers are finally on the right track. Under the guidance of the new system, serfs have burst out with unimaginable enthusiasm for work. What can often be seen on the territory is no longer supervisors waving whips to urge their subordinates to work. Instead, the people under him constantly urged the team leader to inspect and accept the work. Most of the materials sent by the Lars family were marked with work points by Linde and provided to the citizens for exchange. However, because it was still in the early stages of territorial construction, not many people came to exchange, and most of them just came to exchange for some food. Now because there is no contact with the outside world, work points have temporarily replaced part of the function of currency. But when the territory begins to develop, work points will become a simple contribution point. Territories that cannot be self-sufficient will definitely have to rely on wages to purchase in the future. Those merchants' goods, this is why Linde not only pays work points, but also pays wages. Linde stretched out and got up in his tent as usual. When he stretched out his hands until they were a little stiff, Linde realized that Lila and most of the literate maids had been assigned to their jobs by him, and they had only been enjoying it for 2 days. The aristocratic life was thus destroyed by Linde himself. Just when Linde lamented that he had also been corrupted by the extravagant life, he discovered that Reina, who used to go into the mountains early every day to hunt, was now standing at the door of her tent abnormally. After confirming that Linde was dressed, Reina walked into the tent and saluted Linde with all she had learned in her life. This gift directly gave Linde goosebumps all over his body. He quickly helped Reina to the seat and observed carefully, as if he wanted to see from Reina's expression whether Reina had taken the wrong medicine today. Although they are nominally an unmarried couple, the current relationship between Linde and Reina is very delicate. Both of them have a tacit understanding and have not mentioned the marriage contract. Basically, they are living their own lives, and neither of them wants to consummate the marriage. Anyway, the sky is high in the north. The king was far away, the engagement was already done, and there was no urging from the royal family. It seemed that Reina was forgotten just like that. Seeing Linde spinning around her, Reina finally couldn't help it anymore and said, "Brother, don't worry, I'm fine. I just have something very important to talk to you about today." The more Reina said this, the more frightened Linde became. In the game plot, Reina had a lot of bad ideas. She even pretended to be a man and wrote a love letter to the heroine to divert the heroine's attention. "It's just that I'm a little nervous. I don't know how to tell you, and I don't know if you will support me." Reina's originally heroic and arrogant face was now full of nervousness and uneasiness, but Linde said directly and unceremoniously, "If you don't know what to say, just don't say it." Linde is really afraid that Linde will suddenly say, "Brother, I want to rebel. You won't support me, right?" You must know that although Linde is now the master of the territory, the main armed force in the territory is the more than 50 professional knights brought by Rina. These knights are estimated to be able to overthrow Linde's veteran army alone. As long as Rina is willing, she can give Linde the entire power at any time and take the power back. How about that? After finishing speaking, Rina slapped the table excitedly and stood up, as if what Linde said had a motivating effect. To tell you the truth, brother, I was actually the fiancé copyrightee of His Highness the Fourth Prince. I was forced to come to Grey White Collar after being killed by an adulterer. After making this start, Rina seemed to feel much more relaxed, so she continued without hesitation, if you help me return to the royal capital, brother, I will ask the royal family to uphold justice for me and become the prince and concubine again. When I become the queen in the future, I will make you the prime minister of the kingdom. There were so many flaws in Reina's words that Linde didn't know how to complain for a while. First of all, sister, are you sure you want to go back to the capital to fight against the heroine? Are you going to fight the heroine? Are you really or not? And how to return to the royal capital? Sister, do you want to fight back to the royal capital? Even if you really return to the royal capital, the old king suddenly loses his mind and really makes you the prince and concubine again, and you really become the queen later. How can you make me the prime minister of the kingdom? Is the harem intervening in politics or is it a relative seizing power? Well, although there were a lot of bad things like this in the Middle Ages, at least we have to wait until the king is dead, right? What makes Linde want to complain the most is that Reina's words always give Linde the feeling of a scam text message. I am the first emperor of Qin, and I will make you the prime minister of the Qin dynasty. It is better to say that this is no different from a scam text message. But Linde still controlled his expression very well. In order to prevent Reina from really trying to fight back to the capital, Linde asked carefully, Miss Lars, I really want to help you, but what are you going to do? How about returning to the royal capital? Of course, to become the heir of the Lars family. Lina answered matter-of-factly. At this time, Linde, who had not paid much attention to the plot, finally remembered a setting in the game, that is, the heirs of the Grand Dukes of the Four Realms were required to stay in the academy in the royal capital to study. Although it was a bit like a proton, it was actually worse than a proton. There is more freedom and a much higher status. This setting was mainly to allow the heroine to interact with the heirs legitimately, but now it is regarded by Rina as a life-saving straw to return to the royal capital. After all, in Otome games, you don't care whether the settings are reasonable or not, just say whether they are useful or not. Does the Lars family still have no heir? Linde looked at Reina in confusion. In the game, the heirs of the other three realms of the royal capital all have a crush on the heroine, but it seems that there is only one member of the Lars family, and Reina is not yet a member of the Lars family. Heir. Mentioning this, Reina's expression suddenly darkened, and she said sadly, the original heir was my father, but my father disappeared 5 years ago. No wonder there is no mention of who the heir to the north is in the game plot. Just when Linde was about to comfort Lina immediately regained her usual energy and continued to speak excitedly, so now the position of heir to the Lars family is completely vacant. Grandpa has set a rule. Among the descendants whose families have actual feudal territories, whoever manages the territory best and has the most military exploits can become the next Grand Duke. Although Reina's words were very vague, Linde also roughly guessed what Archduke Lars was thinking. The heir he had devoted all his efforts to cultivate was missing. The forces below were ready to take action, in order to prevent future generations from using some despicable means. In the competition for the position of heir, it is better to set up a rule for who wins and who gets the upper hand. This method has advantages and disadvantages. If it succeeds, it will cultivate gu and cultivate outstanding individuals to restore the glory of the North. If it fails, it will directly start civil strife or even split. But Grand Duke Lars dared to play like this because he was probably confident that no descendant would dare to mess around while he was still alive. However, this also shows that Grand Duke Lars is actually no longer able to fully control the entire family, at least the Lars family is no longer. Archduke Lars made his statement clear. So brother, look, since you and I haven't officially gotten married yet, do we still belong to the Lars family? That's right. Linde nodded slightly. Reina only needed to change her surname after the official marriage. The current Reina still belongs to the Lars family. And the Grey White Collar is jointly managed by you and me, can it also be regarded as my territory? Of course. Linde felt a little ashamed, but still admitted it. After all, although Reina was easy to fool, the hands of the knights behind Reina were already on the hilts of their swords. Then since I am a member of the Lars family and have real territory, have I met the conditions to participate in the fight for the heir? Looking at Linde who was beginning to be confused, Reina continued, originally, I thought it would matter whoever became the heir. Anyway, I may not belong to the Lars family in the future, but since you have the ability, brother, why don't we go give it a try? You will manage the territory and I will lead the troops to fight. If you and I are brothers, how can we have a unified general? When Linde heard this, he almost spat out a mouthful of blood, as this incident actually happened because of him. Reina thought that Linde was worried about not being able to compete with other members of the Lars family, and comforted her, brother, don't worry, although my uncle and younger brothers and sisters have richer territories than the grey collar workers, they don't have the support of Grandpa. Grandpa, you must have given me so many supplies because you wanted me to be your heir. Linde wanted to say that if Grand Duke Lars really thought so, he would not arrange the territory in such a remote place. But Reina's next words made Linde suppress the complaint. I want those people in the capital who have laughed at me to know that for 30 years in Hedong and 30 years in Hexi, don't bully a young girl into poverty. Linde finally stopped and asked tentatively, Palace Jade Wine. What? Brother, you want to drink? No, no, it's okay. Linde took out a handkerchief and wiped the sweat on his forehead. Does this sentence actually exist in Cao Dan's other world? Think about it carefully, although he is not a son-in-law, but isn't it true that Lina is the genius whose engagement was broken off? Shouldn't it? Is there a Yao Lao or a weapon spirit in Lina's ring? This can also explain why Reina's strength has reached the level of a strong person at such a young age. But having said that, when it came to competing for the position of heir, Lin thought he could really give it a try. If Reina really became the heir, wouldn't his engagement with Reina be cancelled? And now that Archduke Lars is in charge, I definitely don't dare to go too far in the war of succession. It can be said that it is a deal with 100 benefits and a loss, and there is no reason to refuse it. After Linde expressed his support, the relationship between the two instantly became much closer. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Reina told the story of the game again from her perspective. But when Reina was halfway through speaking, Linde suddenly stopped, looked at Reina with some surprise, and asked seriously, "Wait a minute, Miss Lars, you said that the one in the royal capital who snatched away the fourth prince, what is the name of the new saint?" "Lilith Dorian. She seems to be a little noble from the east. Although she is small, she is really cute. It's just that I don't like her very much. I always feel that she has two different faces in front of His Highness and in front of other people." Reina was still talking to herself, completely unaware of Lin's abnormality. Something is wrong. Lin tapped the table uneasily. Isn't the official heroine's name in the game called Isa Nebet? And she's not the black-haired Lolita described by Reina, but a silver-haired beauty. And more importantly, even though the heroine's name and appearance can be customized in the game, the heroine's birth is fixed. Isn't the heroine a commoner born in the north? How did she become a minor noble in the east? In order to verify the suspicion in his heart, Linde once again interrupted Reina, who was talking endlessly. "Miss Lars, do you know a northern civilian named Isa Nebet in the academy?" Reina was a little angry at first because her speech was interrupted, but when she saw Linde's serious face, she recalled it seriously. In fact, the Lars family and the northerners in the Royal Capital College were paying attention, let alone a commoner. Which is a rare species in aristocratic colleges. Is she the pretty one with silver hair? I do have an impression, but I was dragged here before I graduated. I don't know where she went after graduation. Is she a relative of yours? Linde's expression became horrified. There were other time travelers, and that time traveler had successfully overturned the identity of the heroine. Chapter 9. At this time, Isa Nebet, the heroine of this game, is leading a team of refugees in the Leaves territory, waiting for the Lord to distribute relief grains. Because she deviated from the storyline of the original game, Isa did not become a saint, but returned to the northern border where the war was going on. She used her own abilities to practice medicine and save people at the Cathedral of Our Lady of Salvation. With the continuous defeat of the northern front line, a large number of farmland was destroyed, causing a large number of rural people to become refugees. The Cathedral of Our Lady of Salvation in the north can no longer accept so many refugees, and these refugees can only become refugees and start to flee south. It was under this background that Isa left the church and fled south with this group of refugees. However, as the number of refugees increased, Isa began to feel a little unable to do what she wanted. The savings she had accumulated while working in the royal capital had reached the bottom. But more and more refugees are fleeing with Isa. "Old village chief, drink this bottle of holy water and you will get better soon. May the goddess protect you." After speaking, Isa handed the medicine bottle to an old man's mouth. Sister, how can I, an old man, use such precious holy water? Or, leave it to the young people." The old man's anger is like a gossamer, as if his time is running out. "Don't worry, old village chief, I still have a lot of food here. The Lars family's relief food was transported into the castle yesterday, and it will be distributed soon." With Isa's persuasion, the old man finally drank some holy water, and his face looked much better. In fact, Isa's potion had already been exhausted on the way. The water in the potion bottle has a more accurate name in modern times, placebo. It is actually ordinary river water plus plant ash. For Isa, the 3 years of studying in the royal city were like a dream. Isa once thought about what would happen if she accepted the invitation of the church in the royal city and became a maid of the saint. At least she would not be like, "Are you wandering around with a group of refugees now?" Even the originally eye-catching silver hair turned into boring grey-white on the way to escape. But Isha has no regrets. Even if she has to choose again, Isha feels that she will still return to the north to save refugees. After taking care of the old man, Isa returned to the team. It had been several days since she came to the Sui territory, but the local lord, Earl Jaeger, had no intention of distributing relief food. Because there were more and more refugees in the north, Grand Duke Lars issued a relief order, ordering all the vassals of the Lars family in the north to be obliged to distribute relief food to the refugees who came to the territory, and the Lars family was responsible for compensation of grain or coins to these nobles who distributed relief grains. The refugees have naturally heard this news, but unfortunately, no refugee team has received the so-called relief food so far. Looking at the dimming holy light in her hands, Isa fell into confusion. The strength of a priest's holy light does not represent whether his faith is firm or not, because it is not only faith that affects the holy light, but also magical talent. But if a priest's holy light becomes weaker and weaker, or even dims, then the only possibility is that the priest's faith will be shaken. In order to reflect on why her faith has wavered, Isa has been studying the scriptures in her hands these days. However, the more she studies, the more she finds that reality is incompatible with the scriptures. Obviously the teachings of the goddess are that all people are God's people, and the status of God's people is equal, but why are people divided into rich and poor, high and low? It is clear that the teachings of the goddess are that sins are unforgivable and must be severely punished to wash away sins. Why can the rich use indulgences to escape punishment? Obviously excommunication is the power of the goddess and the Pope. Why would some monks threaten ordinary believers with excommunication to force them to donate money? Obviously the goddess's oracle asked her people to unite, but under the interpretation of the high-ranking bishop, the oracle became someone else's left cheek. You have to stretch out your right cheek to be slapped. Originally, Isa didn't think there was anything wrong with the church's annotated scripture in her hand, but when Isa actually returned to the north for a field trip, she discovered that the beautiful world in the scripture did not exist at all. The demons will not stop the war just because you stretch out your right cheek to hit them. The so-called unity of the church is only aimed at those nobles. The poorer the believer, the greater the amount of donation required. Isa felt that her faith was indeed shaken. Especially when the refugees who followed Isa began to starve to death, but no lord or noble was willing to release food, and even the churches in various places closed their doors. If nothing is done, I am afraid that all the refugees brought out from the Cathedral of Our Lady of Salvation will starve to death in the Leaves territory. Among the refugees at this time, a man was polishing a shovel on a stone to guard against bandits along the way. Although the rusty iron piece of the shovel could not become sharper due to the man's polishing, the man still continued to polish it with red eyes. In the man's arms hung a somewhat shriveled, young corpse that had begun to stink. In the past 2 days, Earl Jaeger opened the door to release the grain, but it was just a small bag of grain, which had to be exchanged for a woman, and it had to be a young and beautiful woman. This is not relief food, because Earl Jaeger said at the time, first of all, let's define what a refugee is. Those who can reach the sweet collar mean that they are people who have the strength to eat. Naturally, they cannot be regarded as refugees, so I can't help give you relief food. It was on that day that the man's wife was selected into the castle and received a bag of grain for her child. But the bag of grain seemed to be expired rice grain that had gone wrong. The man's child had a high fever after eating it. Because there was no medicine and long-term malnutrition, he died the next day. Isa's holy water failed to save the child, and neither did the increasingly dim holy light. No one blamed Isa. This silver-haired nun sold everything she could sell along the way, and even sold her nun's identity certificate, just to get more food so that everyone could reach the territory where relief food was distributed. Isha has already become the spiritual leader of everyone. But whenever Isa thought of the man holding the child's body and crying in front of her and saying, the goddess must have liked this child, so she took the child to the kingdom of God, Isa's heart seemed to be filled with something. Just grab it. In fact, not only men, but also many refugees who were waiting for relief food outside the castle gripped the farm tools in their hands. Some people also cut off the wood and sharpened it into spears. Everyone was unconsciously moving closer to Isa. Because 2 days ago, Count Jaeger not only exchanged expired rice grains for the women among the refugees, but also saw that Isa could not produce the church certificate, and wanted to force Isa into the castle, but Isa pushed her away. Unexpectedly, Count Jacques was not only not angry, but even more excited. He gave Isa 2 days to think about it. If Isa refused again after 2 days, Earl Jacques would send out guards to block the beggars blocking the entrance of his castle. Kill them all. In the past 2 days, Isa did not sit still and wait for death. Although the holy light became darker and darker, Isa still preached every day. However, the content of the sermon was Isa's own insights from the Cathedral of Our Lady of Salvation to the Leaves collar. This is a theory that originates from the scriptures but breaks away from traditional exegesis. It focuses more on poverty, oppression, and injustice, and strives for social justice and equality. It emphasizes the parallelism of divine rights and human rights. What are the means to achieve all this? It's violence. Isa has realized that studying medicine cannot save the North, and only struggle can usher in liberation. Although these ideas are still in the Enlightenment stage, if Linde, who is far away in the grey-collar world, hears this, he will probably shout, FK, Liberation Theology. Chapter 10. Isa actually doesn't quite understand why she is loved by the refugees. In Isa's view, the monks of the Cathedral of Our Lady of the Rescue who stick to the front lines of the war are more worthy of respect. Originally, Isa was not ready to fight 2 days ago, but had already planned to sacrifice herself. However, the old village chief asked Isa before, do you really think that everyone can survive if you sacrifice yourself? The old village chief actually knew everything, but he still drank the holy water given by Isa to reassure Isa. There is only one path before everyone now, and that is struggle. Refugees who don't have enough to eat face the well-armed noble guards and are basically facing a dead end. What's more, this is a magical world. It only takes 1 or 2 mages to completely suppress these muggles. But it doesn't matter anymore. Those who are unwilling to starve have no choice but to die. Since they are all about death, why not make the last move? As promised, the door of the castle slowly opened, and Count Jaeger's overly rewarded face appeared in front of everyone again. During the past 2 days, Earl Jaeger has been lamenting that these refugee women were not played with, and 3 of them were killed in just 2 days. One of them was still talking about her child before he died, which was really disgusting. As for the refugees gathered at the gate of the castle, Earl Jaeger didn't care. In his opinion, it was pointless no matter how many of these lowly bloodlines gathered. Once he deceived the silver-haired nun into the castle, he would kill all these lowly bloodlines. When he opened the castle door and saw Isa surrounded by people, Yeg still maintained the etiquette of the aristocracy and asked elegantly, "What are you thinking about, you fake nun?" Just when Jaeger felt superior because of his elegant demeanor, he found that the atmosphere at the scene seemed a bit awkward. The number of refugees at the gate of the castle far exceeded Jaeger's expectations. Jaeger didn't even know when so many refugees gathered around his castle. Because he originally just wanted to bring a woman into the castle, Jaeger came out with only a few attendants. The hungry eyes at the gate of the castle actually made Jaeger feel a little scared from the bottom of his heart. They're just of lowly blood. Jaeger, you are a noble, a noble. After comforting himself in his heart, Jaeger became arrogant again, but before Count Jaeger could say the next sentence, a simple kill had already penetrated the sky and filled Jaeger's brain. The refugees outside the castle rushed to the castle gate with sickles, hoes, and wooden sticks. Jaeger's first reaction was not to close the door of the castle or hide behind the guards, but to shout, "I am an earl given by your majesty. How dare you pariahs? Really dare?" If he hadn't been pulled back by the guards, Jaeger might have been beaten to death with a shovel by the man at the front. But it was precisely because Jaeger did not issue the order immediately that Isha rushed into the castle with the refugees. At this moment, there was almost no trace of the holy light in Isa's hand, but Isa felt a sense of relief. Countless refugees flocked to the castle and began to vent their emotions to their heart's content. If one person couldn't defeat the soldiers who came to support Jaeger, then 5 or 10 people would do it together. At this moment, Isa seemed to see the true oracle of unity in the scriptures. At this time, a second-level mage hurriedly entered the venue. It could be seen that this mage was disheveled, holding a staff in his hand, but there was still sauce on his mouth that he had not had time to wipe off. The mage waved his staff to construct a spell model, but Isa used the last remaining holy light to instantly cast a divine light spell, blinding the mage's eyes. And because no one had time to come to the aid of the mage, the noble mage, who usually the refugees would not even dare to look at, was instantly overwhelmed by the crowd. But that's all. The castle was not originally designed for comfort, but more for military functions. Just like Jaeger's castle, although the outermost layer was breached, the guards immediately pulled Jaeger and hid in the inner layer. The door to the inner layer was closed tightly. It was impossible to break through with the refugees alone, but in the inner layer, there is a steady stream of soldiers pouring out from specific military gates. After the first wave of impact, the refugees lost their fighting capacity. Some refugees were so hungry that they had no strength to lie down on the spot. Some refugees ran to places with food and began to eat the remaining scraps crazily. But there seemed to be an endless supply of Jaeger's soldiers. It's just that because there are so many refugees, they seem to be evenly matched now. Fortunately, the refugees surrounding Isha were not affected by other refugees, but stayed by Isha's side. Isa didn't even use the holy light and knocked out several soldiers with a shovel herself. However, at this moment, some refugees stopped holding weapons. Because Earl Jaeger hung many figures on the inner wall, and Earl Jaeger himself was shouting to the refugees through the magic amplification of the mage. "Listen to me, you low-blooded people. If you continue to defile my castle with your cow-dung feet, I will kill a woman every 10 minutes. It was only then that the refugees saw that the figures hanging on the wall were the women who had been bought into the castle by Count Jacques 2 days ago. Even without waiting for Count Jaeger to take action, some women were already corpses, and their bodies were covered with scars. In Earl Jaeger's view, the biggest problem now is that these refugees without shoes are stepping on the ground of his carefully decorated castle with their feces-footed feet. In order to prevent the ground of the castle from being polluted by lowly blood, Jaeger did not dispatch the professionals in the inner city, but instead shouted and threatened the refugees to get out. At the same time, a third-level mage threw a big fireball into the sky, shocking all the refugees. "What's the mother of the child?" The man holding the shovel looked at the corpses on the wall with wet eyes, but all the refugees were silent, as if they were frightened by the magic of the mage. This was a power they did not dare to resist. But Isa finally couldn't bear it anymore when she looked at the corpses on the city wall. All beliefs in goddesses were thrown aside by Isa. Now Isa just wanted to catch Jaeger and interrogate him personally using the canon. As for what she had according to the canon, without qualifications, Isa couldn't care less. Liberate the castle and capture Jaeger alive. Isha, whose blood was rising, raised the scripture in her hand that symbolized the goddess's oracle and shouted loudly. Kill her for me." At this time, Jaeger couldn't care less about saving Isa's life, and frantically commanded the professional mages. The mages also reacted quickly and began to build spell models to prepare to capture the thief first. However, at this moment, a miracle happened. As Isa kept shouting "Liberate the castle and capture Jaeger alive," a flash of fire suddenly flashed in the sky, and a meteorite hit the castle directly. Everyone present held their breath as they watched the meteorite explode in the air, turning into a rain of fire and flying directly into Jaeger's camp. The rain of fire didn't even hurt the refugees at all, but hit Jaeger's troops accurately. God's punishment, this is the only thought of everyone present. The fire rain directly hit the morale of Jaeger's army. Several mages who planned to hold up the magic barrier defense were directly killed by the fire rain before they had a chance to cast spells. The refugees below just stared at this scene with their mouths open, as if the gods were specially helping them. Although Isa felt very unbelievable and wondered if the goddess was looking after her. But when did the goddess's business expand to celestial phenomena? But she quickly reacted and led the refugees to shout, "Liberate the castle and capture Jaeger alive! Liberate the castle and capture Jaeger alive!" Miracle, Jaeger saw a miracle. The originally scattered refugees united under the sudden appearance of a miracle, and finally began to organize an effective attack. However, Jaeger's soldiers had long been frightened by the rain of fire from the sky, and the refugees were directly overwhelmed. Captured Jaeger's castle. Chapter 11. The resolution to build public toilets on the territory was immediately agreed to by Reina as soon as Linde proposed it and passed quickly. The priority of this task was raised by one level by Reina, and she even paid for it herself as an additional reward. There is no way, although the royal capital in the game is bright and beautiful, the level of civilization on the border cannot be said to be difficult to describe. It can only be said to have perfectly restored the medieval times. Even in the age of discovery, most western cities, especially western port cities, were full of feces. You even had to wear a round-brimmed hat to prevent last night's filth from being spilled upstairs, and wear high heels to avoid this morning's fresh feces. Not to mention composting excrement, some ordinary people don't even have the concept of toilets, so they deal with it on the spot. Lina, who has been living a noble life, did not consider this problem at the beginning, and Linde, who had been fleeing, did not notice this problem either, resulting in a stinky smell in the territory now, especially after the citizens had eaten. If the toilet is not built, Linde will feel like he is going to get a taste of it. Lord, the water has been boiled. Li La walked into the tent and reported to Linde with a stack of experimental reports in her hand. It's still the same as before. Although the boiling water produced steam, it still didn't produce enough driving force as you said. Listening to Li La's report, Linde took the experimental report and scratched his hair in frustration. Boiling water actually doesn't work in this world. Although the process of boiling water is exactly the same as in the previous life, the power generated by the steam is much smaller, and it is only limited to making the boiling water roll twice. Linde also suspected that the water in this world might not be water at all, but except that steam could not generate power, all physical reactions were almost exactly the same as the water in the previous life. There is something blocking or diluting the power generated by the steam, and the most likely thing is magic. The experimental report also verified Linde's conjecture. To be more precise, the water element in this world dilutes the power generated by the steam. However, under the current conditions, it can only be tested up to this point. As for what the power of water element dilution has become, and whether the water element itself can become a new power, we don't know. All in all, it is definitely not feasible to rely on boiling water to cheat. If you want to start industrialization, you must find other ways to generate stable power. What worries Linde most is that if the power of steam can be diluted, will the power produced by gunpowder be diluted by the fire element? What is the microscopic system of this world like? Will the actions of microorganisms also be diluted? Is it different from the previous life? In that case, even the manure that is now being piled on the territory may not be successful. Although Linde has always believed that the greatest advantage of time travelers is not just modern technology such as gunpowder steam engines, but the idea of a Euro standardized industrialization and insights far ahead of the times, Linde still felt a little uncomfortable when he really couldn't boil water. However, Linde quickly adjusted his mentality. After all, this is a world of magic. He is obsessed with boiling water to make a power source, which is a bit far-sighted. Isn't there such a convenient energy as magic? I have inherited the heroine's skills and attributes and can rub the holy light with my hands. I still hold on to the physics of my previous life, but I am a bit idealistic. Moreover, the set of physics in the previous life is not completely useless. At least it is not in a state where physics no longer exists. Whether it is a pulley or a lever, it can be used. Gravity and the like are also the same as in the previous life. Linde, don't worry about becoming a hydrogen person. After adjusting his mentality, Linde put down the report and asked, has the sugar factory successfully reproduced the previous results? Although the quality is relatively poor, the first batch has been successful, but... Lila hesitated and said, it's still not possible to mass produce it. I understand, don't worry, bring a batch of finished products first and help me arrange my trip to Fasten Town downstream. As commanded. Lila lifted up her skirt gracefully, but did not exit directly. Instead, she stared at Linde with dark circles under her eyes. In desperation, Linde had no choice but to say what Lila had said to Reina, Lila, Maid Chief, there are still many unresolved problems in the territory, and you can't rest yet. Although Lila's face was full of exhaustion, there was nothing Linde could do. Reina's knights were not willing to work under him. Now the employees could only follow the standard of the previous life where the heroes were useful and they would be used to death. Although boiling water failed, fortunately the sugar production was successful. There are beets on the territory that can be made into white sugar. After washing, shredding, exuding, heating, settling, steaming, and finally cooling naturally, after repeated experiments, Linde was finally able to slightly improve his food. However, because there is no professional equipment, the whole process is very primitive. Even the mixing machine can only use the simplest crank and wooden barrel, and cannot make much sugar in a day. Even if Linde adopts assembly line operations, it cannot make up for the shortcomings in equipment, and the output is still very low. But it was enough. When the female workers on the territory saw the separated sugar crystals, their hands were shaking with excitement. Linde learned from Reina that almost all white sugar in this era was made by alchemists, and the process was extremely complex and the materials were very abstract, including bat tears and frog urine, which required a lot of strange things to refine into some crystallized white sugar. Those people in the territory still think that Linde secretly used some magic on the way, instead of refining these crystal white sugars by his own strength. This is also related to the assembly line operation. These workers have no way of knowing the entire sugar production process, but Linde does not intend to correct it. The complex white sugar process was probably born due to market demand. After all, the more complicated and mysterious the production process is, the more the nobles like it. The raw materials of the sugar shipped by the Lars family are better than those mentioned above, which is more acceptable to England. At least they are made of bee poop. At least the raw materials are sweet. Well, it doesn't seem to be very acceptable. It can only be said that because of the existence of magic, the technology tree of this world is a bit ridiculously abstract. The beets on the roadside obviously have a sweet taste, but because the nobles abandon this kind of food that is only eaten by untouchables, there is no one at all. They considered using it to refine sugar, but instead they pursued something completely unknown that was refined with magic. As for the yellow mud water drench method, this thing is no different from alchemy to the current Linde. The yellow mud water is not an ordinary mud. Some people speculate that it is an alkaline clay. However, no one can figure out how to make this alkaline clay. Recurrence. This is not a recording error, it is simply lost. In his previous life, Linde hated those who dismissed the entire book Tiangong Kaiwu because one place could not be reproduced. At least the keel water wheel recorded in it was still in use in Linde's hometown in his previous life. Linde even used it when he was a child. Stepped on. And Linde has just finished drawing the keel water wheel and is preparing to promote it in the territory. The most troublesome thing for Linde in the territory now is not the Knights of Reina who cause trouble for him from time to time, nor is it the occasional conflicts between Linde's original subjects and the subjects brought by the Lars family. The biggest problem in the territory is the lack of labor. In fact, the territory now has a population of 700 to 800 people. Excluding Reina's knights and the veterans who were arranged by Linde as officials, there are still too few people who can work. It takes people to build toilets, build houses, open up wasteland, and the experiments arranged by Linde also need people. Even though Reina helps Linde go into the mountains to search for mineral deposits every day, actually, he goes to the mountains to play, there are still serious deficiencies in the population arrangement. Although experiments such as cement and gunpowder cannot be started now due to material problems, it is obvious to the naked eye that they require a lot of manpower, and they cannot be serfs who know nothing. Reina's letter to Grand Duke Lars has been sent. Linde can only pray that Grand Duke Lars can bring more craftsmen to the territory and stop shipping any luxury goods, especially those candies made from bee excrement. As for the replacement of the heroine, Linde has asked Reina to find someone, although it is a bit strange to have the villainous daughter in the game find the original heroine in the game. Of course, due to the lag in news in this era, Linde did not know that Reina had not yet rebelled, but that the heroine of the original work had already rebelled first. Chapter 12. Why is the technology tree of this world said to be abstract? Even in the Middle Ages in the previous life, there were already large water wheels, and later on, water-powered forging hammers were developed, which helped lower the price of the knight's plate armor. But there is nothing in this world, let alone a water-powered forging hammer, not even a large water wheel. The reason is also very simple, it is magic. When second level, third level, and even some magic apprentices can easily make a rain or divert a section of water for irrigation with the help of magic circles and scrolls, who would invent irrigation tools? Just like when there was freezing technology, no one would think of inventing refrigerators and air conditioners. At least the nobles would not consider this kind of thing at all, because even if they really don't have the money to hire professional mages or druids to irrigate their fields, the cost of spending some money to let serfs carry water for irrigation is lower than inventing a water wheel. Even if some smart farmers can think of similar devices, they will be lost in history because they are unable to realize them due to poverty, or they are realized but unable to spread. Especially in this world, feudal ignorance occupies an overwhelming advantage, and the development of civilization will remain rigid and slow for hundreds of years. The abstract technology tree is the concrete embodiment of this state. Amid the exclamations of the residents, Linde personally stepped on the keel water wheel to introduce the water from the aqueduct into the farmland. But no one exclaimed like magic, this must be magic like Zhang Tang did before. Because the principle of the keel water wheel is not complicated, as long as you understand the sprocket transmission, you can make a big difference. Many children even looked eager to try it when they saw the pedal sprocket. But before the kid brother could go up and do it, Reina had already taken off her boots and stepped on the wheel of the water wheel. Ooh, brother, look, this wheel is spinning so fast. Reina was like a child who just got a new toy, pedaling the wheel quickly. However, because this water wheel was only a test product, and Reina's body was too strong, the water wheel quickly fell apart, and Reina also fell. Arrived in the fields. The knights immediately went up to surround Lina, who had a silly smile on her face. Most of the surrounding citizens wanted to laugh but did not dare to laugh, so they could only suppress the corners of their mouths as much as they could. Only Linde silently slapped his forehead. In the past few days, Reina has really let herself go more and more, and can even be said to be a little lawless. But fortunately, she has not done anything harmful to the world. The most she has done is grab toys from her little brother. Don't tell me, when Reina snatched the children's toys on the territory, she really looked like a villain. After patting the dirt on her body, Reina said to Susan next to her, "This is good. Make me a stronger one out of black iron so that I can play with it every day." Yes. Looking at Susan's serious expression, Linde really couldn't understand why Lina's knights could hold their own. Is it because they were used to it? Brother, do you still have this kind of toy? Looking at Reina who was looking forward to it, Linde did not correct Reina's mistake. Instead, he thought about whether he could make the bicycle in advance. Although it would definitely not be mass-produced, and there would be no bicycles without road construction. It has practical significance, but it shouldn't be a big problem if it's just for Lina to play with. After all, he is the sponsor, so he must be coaxed. Later, Reina, who was circling the keel water wheel, asked again, "Brother, do you think you can add a stick that rotates with the sprocket? Put the other end of the stick in the river of tears, and use the water flow to drive the sprocket. What about rotation? Transmission lever." Linde almost subconsciously said the device that Reina mentioned. "Yes, that's what I mean. Brother, you are really a worm in my stomach. That's roundworm." Linde, who was a little shocked that Linde was not a fool just now, changed his eyes to look at a fool again. "But in this case, the water wheel you mentioned also needs to be modified." Reina picked up a branch and started writing and drawing on the ground. "The more I draw Linde's expression, the more horrifying he becomes." "Yes, it is horrifying." With just a random drawing, Reina had already figured out a rough model of a water wheel-driven water wheel. This is no less than a fool deducing a formula theorem by himself. Is this fool really a genius? You must know that Linde asked in detail before. There is nothing similar to a water wheel in this world, but Linde only gave him a theoretical basis and model, and Reina actually designed a tool that she had never seen before. If what I drew is feasible, can it be modified and used to forge steel and armor with water flow? Damn it, when Linde was distracted for a while, Reina's mind had already jumped to the hydraulic forging hammer, and she had even started to draw a design. "Miss Lars, how did you come up with the idea of a euro using water power to forge steel?" Linde's expression was already quite serious, but Reina smiled sheepishly and said, "After all, our Lars family used to be blacksmiths. Grandpa always told me that we can't lose our family's craftsmanship, and we can still talk about it when we are down in the future." Eat. For a moment, Linde suddenly suspected that Reina's shortcomings were hereditary. Would the eldest daughter of the majestic Grand Duke of the North have to work as a blacksmith to earn a living because of her downfall? But seeing Reina's silly smile, Linde suddenly understood that Archduke Lars, who was far away in the royal capital, might be serious. Looking at Reina's continuous improvement of the sketch, Linde also picked up a branch and joined in. With Linde's help, a theoretically operational sketch of a hydraulic forging hammer device was completed. In the middle of the process, Linde also added some physics knowledge to Reina, and Reina understood it instantly at an astonishing speed. Even Linde, who was not a physics major, was losing ground. Reina is really a genius, in the physical sense. Although it should not run smoothly, to be honest, are there really materials that can support speed changes and transmissions now? If not, it is just a large toy. Linde started to feel sorry for himself while looking at the sketch. However, Reina immediately answered, "The materials are not simple. You can use those alchemy materials. As long as you tell your needs, the alchemists can make them for you. It's just a matter of price." Then Reina smiled confidently, "But for the Lars family, money is not a problem." Linde then remembered that this world really has magic and alchemy, so he nodded and said, "Then let's go to the downstream town of Faison tomorrow. I just have some other ideas that require a lot of alchemy gold material." "Faison town? Are you going to the champagne market?" Reina's energy seemed to never be exhausted, and she was jumping around Linde excitedly, seemingly eager to try. "Not entirely. I have something to discuss with Viscount Jefferson of Faison town, and of course I have to go to the champagne market." Upon hearing this answer, Reina immediately said excitedly, "Go, of course. I haven't visited the civilian market yet. I'll pack my luggage right away." As soon as she finished speaking, Reina ran away with a bunch of knights, and Linde had no choice but to shout, "I will be back the same day, there is no need to clean up." The champagne market is a well-known market in the west of the north. However, the place where the champagne market is held is not fixed. Instead, it is held in turns on the territory of the lords known as the Champagne nobles. This time it happened to be the turn of the neighbors downstream of Linde. Viscount Jefferson, of Faison. Although he was a viscount, Jefferson made a lot of money from the champagne market, and even some earls and marquises needed to borrow money from Jefferson. Moreover, the champagne market is not just about selling wine, nor is it just a market. It has developed into a commercial activity, with not only various shops, but also circuses. Performances such as this. Because she had a strict upbringing since she was a child, all Reina's knowledge of the market came from night novels, so Reina was looking forward to this trip. She dragged Linde, who was still sleeping, onto the boat at dawn the next day. Even before he could say hello to Jefferson after getting off the boat, Linde was dragged to the market by Reina. In the market, various stalls are densely packed, and the hustle and bustle of the market and the crowd come together to form a bustling and lively scene. There are farmers setting up stalls selling brightly colored fruits and vegetables, vendors displaying various poultry and livestock, and craftsmen displaying their works, such as wood carvings, pottery, leather goods, etc., on their stalls, attracting the attention of passers-by. Look. You can even see some special stalls, such as the healer's stall, the mage's stall and the prophet's stall. Those mages at the stall, I can't even feel the slightest fluctuation of magic power, it's amazing. Reina marveled at a mage stall selling amulets and divination. That one is a liar. Linde pulled Reina away with a speechless expression. Reina's knights are already holding a lot of strange handicrafts, but Reina is still buying things here and looking here. In fact, these handicrafts are not as exquisite as those at Reina's home. They were seen in the royal capital, and Reina would not even take a glance at them. But Reina still bought it, because the eyes of those selling handicrafts were exactly the same as the eyes of the people when Reina was managing grey and white-collar workers. It reminded Reina of herself who couldn't do anything well at that time, which made Reina want to do something for these people. Order something, but in the end you can only spend money on their cheap handicrafts. The market was very lively, but it was not what Reina imagined. Weapons and wine bottles were flying, swearing and fighting were the same, and there were probably more pickpockets than guests. Mercenaries and adventurers are not as bold as written in night novels. Instead, they come in groups to threaten sellers with no background. The champagne nobles manage the market and do not allow $0 purchases, so let these merchants offer a 50% discount, and if they don't offer a 50% discount, they will break their bones. This is free trade. Reina originally thought that the veteran beside Linde was outrageous when he claimed that he had ridden a dragon. Unexpectedly, the mercenaries in the tavern also claimed that they had killed dragons and bathed in dragon blood. Now they are invulnerable and can ride at night. Reina didn't hear the rest of the content because Susan beside her covered her ears. However, even Reina felt that the man was lying because he was hesitant like the veteran beside Linde and couldn't tell the truth about the dragon. What does it look like? Chapter 13. The trade in the market is more developed than Linde imagined. He only needs to negotiate with the merchants who sell materials and alchemy equipment and pay a deposit, and those merchants will deliver everything to Linde's territory. Because there are champagne nobles as guarantees, there is basically no need to worry about these businessmen running away with their money, unless they don't want to hang out in the north. This is somewhat ironic, because these nobles in charge of the northern market may have stronger control over the north than the current Lars family. As for the procurement of materials for making gunpowder and cement, it was much smoother than Linde imagined. Linde had seen the witchcraft market in Africa in his previous life. The materials in it were all kinds of strange, and there were also some materials that were really useful in the chemical industry. The same goes for the markets in this world. Even because of the existence of magic, the material trade is even more developed. For example, the nitrate, disulfide, and charcoal needed to make gunpowder are actually very common alchemy materials. It is not strange to purchase them in large quantities. You can even put some requirements on these materials, such as retorting all the charcoal before sending it to the territory. This made Linde more curious about the alchemy in this world. To be honest, Linde wanted to bring those alchemists back more than the alchemy materials. Thanks for your patronage, there are a total of 247 silver leaf coins. I'll give you a 0 and count you 240. The proprietress of the shop is in her early 30s, wearing a magic robe with loose sleeves but tight in the middle, and holding a pipe inlaid with gold wire. She still looks charming. The landlady's tone was a little lazy, but her words were very polite. Although Linde bought a large amount of materials, to be honest, they were not very expensive. They were about the same as Lena's weekly pocket money. Linde also readily paid the deposit. These materials not only include those needed to make gunpowder, but also a large number of chemical materials that Linde can recognize and some alchemy equipment, which is a bit like training for alchemists in the territory. Of course, the main reason why it is not expensive is because Linde did not buy those abstract materials. If it were those very abstract magic materials, the price might have increased several times. For example, a bunch of unknown animal bones and possibly human bones were ground into slok powder, internal organs that had been drained of blood, shriveled poisonous snake specimens, very suspicious dragon dung that looked like cow dung, etc. Sir, do you want to hire an alchemist? The landlady puffed a lot and looked at Linde. Yes, I heard that a qualified noble cannot be without his own alchemist. Do you have any related business? I only ask that it be best to be proficient in both runes and magic circle systems. Linde had already briefly understood the magic system of this world from Lena before. Although Lena's explanation was full of pronouns such as this and that, Linde still understood it. The most profitable magic is alchemy, and the most promising one that can directly improve productivity is the rune magic circle that can cast spells semi-automatically. It is not that there are no magic craftsmen who can use runes in the territory, but Linde still needs to study systematically to understand what the runes in this world are like. The landlady saw Linde waving his hand to disperse the smoke in front of his eyes, and she took the initiative and tapped the cigarette rod lightly to extinguish the cigarette. Of course you can. Our Shuajin Merchant Alliance sells everything, including people. After saying that, the proprietress took out a piece of information from her chest and handed the warm information to Linde. Ignoring the proprietress's fourth-dimensional chest, Linde took the information and looked at it carefully. The academic system in this world is very confusing. Just in the alchemy lineage, there are dozens of schools, large and small, not counting those schools that are hidden underground and cannot be seen. These alchemists are also professionals. People who can use and mobilize magic are called professionals, but each person's profession is different. Alchemists are also different from the alchemists of the previous Renaissance. They can't produce results just by stirring the pot with materials. Instead, they have to use a kind of refining magic to blend the materials. It is worth mentioning that the knights who specialize in melee combat are also professionals and can also use and mobilize magic power. Hundreds of years ago, these magical powers were called fighting spirit by knights. However, some scholars have discovered that the so-called fighting spirit is just another form of magical power. This study ended the question of who is stronger, knights or mages, from ancient times to modern times. The eternal problem, it turns out that the knight is just another form of melee mage. Although there is magic in this world, it is unexpectedly materialistic in some aspects. For example, the human body is made up of water, protein, fat, carbohydrates, minerals, vitamins, etc., so the limit of physical strength is just that, and there is no way to exercise the physical body. Just train your fat and carbohydrates to a fantasy level that can withstand high temperatures of thousands of degrees and break through the sound barrier. The mage releases the condensed magic power and constructs it into various spell models to perform various magics, while the knight is equivalent to using magic power to equip himself with a layer of permanent power mecha, in order to achieve some human achievements. Things the body cannot do. As for those knights who only cultivated their bodies but not their brains, they have long been eliminated by history. After searching several times, Linde finally found the school of alchemists that was closest to his requirements. The Rune Stigmata Alchemy Society, or the Talisman Saint Society for short. This was composed of some groups of alchemists who specialized in the study of runes, and later mages who studied scrolls and monks who studied stigmata also joined in. This group believes that different runes and pictures can bring different powers, and pursues perfect rune arrangement and exquisite spell model construction. Are you interested in the Rune Stigmata Alchemy? Although the landlady was playing with her pipe, she also noticed Linde's gaze lingering on this document. Before Linde could answer, the landlady continued, although the Talisman Saint Society seems to be very in line with your requirements, I still want to remind you that in fact, most alchemists also study runes, even some alchemists have higher rune levels than this Rune Stigmata Alchemy Club. Linde understood what the landlady meant, looked at the information in his hand doubtfully and asked, is there anything wrong with this Talisman Saint? They have had some internal problems recently. The former president just passed away, and the research topic was too deviant and went bankrupt. As a result, the association's research cannot make ends meet. Most of the members have left the association, and only some who are not of high level are left. The alchemists are ready to take action against the society's legacy. Generally speaking, alchemy is the most profitable magic, and alchemists usually don't have to worry about food and drink. Even if alchemy is very expensive, as long as they attract sponsorship among the nobles, their income will immediately exceed that of their peers. Other professionals of the same level. What is the subject that can bankrupt an alchemist association and even make most people give up? Seemingly seeing the confusion in Linde's eyes, the landlady explained, they want ordinary people who can't perceive magic to be able to use magic, so no nobles are willing to fund them. Linde almost spit out a mouthful of tea. Isn't this what a time traveler should do? Are the thoughts of the indigenous people in other worlds so advanced? Did they succeed? As far as I know, there has been absolutely no progress. Seeing Linde's interest, the lady boss began to introduce the Alchemist Association. This association is said to have been established by the old president to treat his daughter. However, after the old president's death, the old president's family chose someone else to inherit the title, causing the association to lose its most important income support. Now it was torn apart. After all, which noble would be willing to allow civilians without any magical talent to use magic? Even a noble without any magical talent would not sponsor the Talisman Saint Society, because once he sponsors it, he will admit that he is a waste without magic. With this kind of money, it is better to have more children, or adopt 2 talented children from the huge aristocratic network. Therefore, not only did the Rune Stigma Chain Gold Association not have any sponsorship, but it encountered obstacles at every turn and was even targeted. Even an organization like the Shuajin Merchant Alliance, which only values a euro money, does not want to recommend it to customers because it feels that the Rune Stigmata Chain Gold will be difficult to generate subsequent income. After listening to the introduction, Linde couldn't help but sigh. 1 step ahead of the times is a genius, and 2 steps ahead of the times is a madman. Although the original intention of the Fu Shengui may not be advanced, the content of the research can be said to be too advanced in this era. So that no one understands them at all, and those who do understand them become hostile to them. But it was precisely because of this that Linde became interested in this alchemy association. My territory just needs some people who can teach basic alchemy and rune knowledge, so this association is the one. After saying that, Linde directly took out 3 times the deposit, and placed the beautiful silver coins on top of the Fu Shengui information. The employment price of Fu Shengui is quite cheap, and you don't need so many silver coins. The landlady pushed the silver coin back, but Linde reached out to stop it. No, I'm not hiring them, I'm buying them. After hearing this, the boss lady seemed to know that someone took the initiative to help clean up the company's negative assets. She immediately put on a business smile, took out a contract from her chest and said, what a wise decision, Rune Stigmata Chain Gold, it will be very suitable for teaching beginners. You are really discerning and the talents you need will be sent to your territory in the near future. After signing a contract that both parties were very satisfied with, Linde walked out of the Shuajin Merchant Alliance chain store with satisfaction. As soon as he stepped out of the store, Linde saw Reina squatting at the door waiting for him without any aristocratic look. Are you done talking, brother? Linde nodded, looking at Reina's look a little disappointed. Out of concern for the sponsor's father, Linde asked with concern, what happened? Miss Lars, you don't seem very happy. It's nothing, I just feel that the market is different from what I thought. Linde had seen this expression on the face of a female colleague who was on a business trip to Paris in her previous life. At that time, she repeatedly told other teachers in the office how stinky Paris was. There was more human excrement on the streets than dog excrement. What a mess. For a while, everyone had to avoid her when going to dinner. There is a term called Paris syndrome to describe this phenomenon of house collapse. It seems that this champagne market is different from what the young lady saw in the night novels, which caused the dream to be broken. Let's go. Don't you still have something to talk about with Jefferson? Let's go back quickly after we finish talking. I think it's time for a grey collar. Reina adjusted her mood, immediately sat up, patted the dust on her skirt, and put on her usual smile. Chapter 14. If there is a standard aristocratic template in the world, then Jefferson can be said to be this template. His hair is carefully combed and complements his shining golden beard, showing his noble status and power. A gorgeous coat covered his broad shoulders, inlaid with the exclusive family emblem of Face in Town, which also declared his family lineage and status. Jefferson's lazy yet elegant movements made Linde look at Reyna, who was so reserved to the side, and somewhat doubted who was the real noble. The etiquette of a viscount in a borderland is much better than that of Reyna. It's no wonder that in the game, the fourth Prince Crane doesn't like Reyna at all. Viscount Linde roll, I have heard about you, and I deeply sympathize with your experience. After finishing speaking, Jefferson looked at Linde and Reyna meaningfully, making it unclear whether he was expressing sympathy for Linde for losing his original territory, or pitying Linde for marrying the granddaughter of Archduke Lars. Jefferson didn't show much respect to Lina, and the etiquette was just the etiquette when facing a noble lady. It's not that Jefferson didn't understand etiquette. In any case, Jefferson's etiquette course was at least better than that of someone who broke the teacher's ruler with his big butt and fed the teacher to pass the test. The status among nobles is very complicated. We have to take into account the political environment at the time, marriage, family financial resources, etc. Reyna's status is indeed not comparable to ordinary nobles, but because of the political turmoil in the royal city and the fact that Jefferson is not an ordinary viscount, so Jefferson just treated Reyna as Linde's wife. Of course, the main reason was that Jefferson could tell at a glance at the dinner table that Linde was the talkative person in the upper reaches of the grey-collar industry, while Reyna was just a flower vase. But to be honest, although Jefferson was polite and courteous to Linde, he did not show much respect. In the eyes of the nobles in the north, Linde was just a son-in-law of the Lars family, and even the title of the Lars family none, it can be said that they are not even a branch of the Lars family. And even though Lina is the eldest granddaughter of the Lars family, Lina did not participate in the air war in the north, at least not from Jefferson's perspective, and Jefferson had secretly invested in several other Lars, whichever Lars came to power later, Jefferson would always sit firmly on the Taijutsu, and his status was much higher than that of Linde's son-in-law. Therefore, in the face of Linde's visit, Jefferson did not hold any dance, nor did he invite other nobles. Reyna's current reputation was so bad that even if she invited other nobles, she would probably refuse. Mr. Jefferson, I'm not here to complain to you. Besides, I'm living a good life in grey-collar work. I like my life now. Because he inherited the charm of the heroine, Linde always had a gentle and approachable charm in his words, which also made Jefferson feel a little fond of him, but it was limited to this. Jefferson even complained in his heart that there was Archduke Lars. Material assistance is definitely not much different. The main reason I came here this time is to discuss a business deal with you. After saying that, Linde took out a box that was not considered exquisite. Although there were many exquisite gift boxes thanks to the assistance of Grand Duke Lars, Linde really could not understand the nouveau-riche aesthetic of farmhouses popular in the kingdom, so he could only design them himself. Seeing the quaint wooden box, Jefferson smiled to himself, hey, what kind of garbage is this? 80% of the reason was that the territory was not managed well. The son-in-law took out the fashionable trash that Archduke Lars gave him and sold it. Jefferson had even thought of how to politely refuse Linde. But the moment the wooden box was opened, Jefferson jumped up and immediately became sitting upright, exclaiming in his heart, damn it, I have to sit up and talk to him. In the wooden box is a handful of crystal clear white sugar. Unlike those refined from strange materials, the white sugar in the wooden box has almost no impurities and is of very high quality. Moreover, Jefferson also understood that Linde definitely did not resell the sugar brought by Archduke Lars, because even the sugar made from a pot of bee dung and a bunch of expensive materials by the Lars family was not of such high quality. Recalling the report from his entourage that Linde purchased a large amount of alchemy supplies at the Champagne market, Jefferson was almost certain that Linde had mastered a new sugar recipe and was preparing to produce it on a large scale. Viscount Linde, can I have a taste? The attraction of sugar to nobles is fatal, even Jefferson showed his greedy eyes without concealment. Of course, this box is for you, Mr. Jefferson. Hearing Linde's answer, Jefferson even felt that the somewhat simple wooden box had become simple, and grand. It seemed to be an aesthetic that was different from the aristocracy's current aesthetic of more complicated being better, revealing a sense of high-end. Jefferson wiped the silver spoon in his hand repeatedly with a napkin, carefully picked up a spoonful of white sugar, and put it into his mouth. The taste of sugar is like the sweet breeze under the warm spring sun, gently brushing the tip of the tongue, arousing Jefferson's endless joy and satisfaction. This sweetness is different from those white sugars that cannot remove the taste of other alchemy materials, but a pure sweetness. The sugar stimulated Jefferson's brain, making it impossible for him to maintain his aristocratic reserve. Somewhat impolitely, he put the wooden box next to him and solemnly closed the lid. How many silver leaf coins do you plan to sell? How much do you still have in stock? Can all these snowflake-like candies be sold to face in town? After asking a series of questions, Jefferson also realized that he was rude, and then blushed and wiped his mouth with a napkin to hide his embarrassment. Linde also pretended not to have seen it, but gave Jefferson answers one by one. The current inventory is not much, there are too few people in our territory, and a quarter of the population in the territory has been used to produce these snowflakes. 1/4 refers to the fact that after Reyna's knights and management veterans are removed, 1/4 of the remaining people who work are old, weak, women and children. As for the name snowflake candy, Linde feels that Jefferson's description is very accurate. At least it sounds better than white sugar, so I just went with the flow and continued to use it. As for who to sell to, Mr. Jefferson, you have also seen that our territory has just begun to develop, there are not many merchants, and transportation other than waterways is not convenient, so we plan to let you, Viscount Jefferson, do the selling on our behalf for the time being. Okay, I'll buy as much as you can. Upon hearing this, Jefferson interrupted Linde without caring about etiquette, and immediately stated that he would accept all orders from now on. After that, the two parties also discussed some details. For example, if other nobles wanted the agency rights of snowflake candy, Linde had to notify Jefferson first and negotiate with Jefferson. There was no other way. Before the grey and white collars started to build roads, they could only rely on him for the time being. Jefferson's champagne bazaar and connections to sell. And Jefferson also regularly organized daily necessities merchants to trade with grey-collar workers. As for the price, Linde originally planned to sell a box of 60 silver leaf coins, but in order to hide the cost, Linde asked for 200 silver leaf coins. Unexpectedly, Jefferson agreed without even thinking. At this time, Linde I found that I still underestimated the wealth of these nobles. A rich peasant family could work for less than 20 silver leaf coins for a year, but a nobleman felt like he had made a profit when he bought a box of candy for 200 silver leaf coins. No wonder Reina still felt that her weekly pocket money of more than 200 silver leaf coins was still short. Linde's poverty limited his imagination. In this way, under Reina's somewhat surprised gaze, Jefferson first ordered 100 boxes of snow candies. This was only the minimum purchase quantity stipulated by Jefferson. How many more Linde would produce in the future would be as many as Jefferson wanted. The deal for at least 20,000 silver leaf coins was concluded in this way. Midway through, Jefferson found an excuse to temporarily leave the banquet with the box of snowflakes. The more Jefferson looked at the simple box in his hand, the more he liked it, especially the sense of high-end revealed in the simple lines. It seemed that this was something that should be used in the homes of great nobles. After handing the box to the butler, Jefferson said, "Use sandalwood and gold wire to make a few imitations of this box for me to see. I'm sure it will be more popular with the nobility than the nouveau riche aesthetic of the Augustine family." Faced with his master's rebellious speech, the old butler had no reaction. After all, in the current northern border, the first thing that counts is gold coins, the second is the Lars family, and the third is the royal family, and Jefferson happened to have a lot of gold coins. Also, ask your people to buy all the alchemy materials and equipment that Viscount Linde bought at the champagne market today, and then let the alchemists in the family try to use these materials to see if they can refine the same thing. Here comes the snowflake candy. After arranging everything, Jefferson returned to the table with a warm smile. By the way, dear brother, the thing you asked me to do in your letter has come to fruition. Jefferson's title of Linde was directly upgraded to wonderful brother, and he also had an extra roll of parchment in his hand. In Linde's previous invitation, Linde specifically asked Jefferson to help find information about Isa Nebet, the heroine of the original game, but Jefferson didn't take it to heart at the time. Now in order to close the relationship, Jefferson we can only temporarily find out all the relevant information, whether true or false. The evil heretic, the White Witch Isa Nebet, is raising hundreds of thousands of troops in the north in an attempt to overthrow the rule of the Cape Kingdom. Linde didn't stop at the first sentence and almost spit out a mouthful of tea. For the first time, Linde learned about the information transmission in this world, or how unreliable those bards were. On the parchment is the news about the heroine Isa recorded by the bards in the north. And it has been derived into several versions, each version is different. Among them is the fact that Isha has become the chosen one of the goddess of the undead and is leading 100,000 living dead to attack the city and plunder the land. And Isa became Yuri, and now has nearly 1 million brainwashed people under her command. Isa collected 500,000 gold shields from the demons and is now wreaking havoc everywhere in the northern border. The most outrageous thing is that Linde even saw his own name on the list of victimized nobles. Not only that, I heard that when Isa and Earl Jaeger were fighting, there was a sudden strong wind, and there was no light in the sky and earth. Then suddenly there was a rain of meteorites on the collar of the leaves, killing Earl Jaeger instantly. What is this all about? Please God, did you invite Lu Xiu or Judy? The more reliable one is that Isa led the refugees and serfs to rebel, but it also focused on describing how cruel Isa was to the nobles. The content was so detailed that Linde suspected that the person who wrote this message was an R18G writer. The only thing that is certain is that the heroine of the original work took the lead in the rebellion, even before Reina, the future rebel. The world is crazy. This is Linde's only thought after reading the information on the parchment. Chapter 15. Linde declined Jefferson's request to stay overnight and took Reina back to Grey Collar that day. The information Jefferson provided about the heroine Isa is not useless. At least among the outrageous information, 2 points can be confirmed. The first is that the heroine Isa Nebet killed the lord of the Cluster Leaf territory, claimed to be the White Saint, and raised a flag to rebel. The second is that the heroine Isa Nebet is now heading to the west of the north, that is, in the direction of the Grey Collar. It is meaningless to study the reasons for Isa's rebellion now. What Linde is most concerned about is when the heroine will arrive at Grey Collar and how many people she will bring with her. Although the message written by the bard on the parchment hand was exaggerated, according to Linde's calculation, the number of people brought by the heroine was not many, only a few thousand at most, at least not tens of millions. There aren't that many people in the north. It was said that they were rebelling, but the heroine did not have a base, and she did not even succeed in occupying the Sui territory that she captured at the beginning. Linde estimated that it was because there was no help from the heroine Isa's rebellion, and there were not many professionals. With a group of civilians, it was impossible to occupy a place for a long time. After all, there was still an insurmountable gap between ordinary people and professionals. Going to the west of the northern territory is probably because there are many small nobles here and the aristocracy is generally not strong. In addition, even in the vast and sparsely populated northern territory, the west side has a very low population density, so in the west maybe no one really cares about occupying a hilltop. After returning to the territory, or to be more precise, he was still a grey-collar worker in the camp. Linde ignored Lina, who had been chattering beside him and wanted to see how the sugar was produced, and thought about the possibility of recruiting the heroine Isa. In the current northern territory, there is an invasion of demons from outside, the internal aristocratic factions are in chaos, the largest lord is fighting a succession war, and no one really cares about 1 or 2 rebels. The only problem is that the heroine has already killed a count. So, which one is more important, sheltering a rebel who killed a noble, or winning over a destiny's son? Well, hesitating for even a second is disrespectful to the heroine. According to the setting, the heroine is not only a human god designated by the goddess, but also a saint in the true sense. In the later stages of the game, she can really perform miracles. Even when the situation in the north is completely chaotic, as long as the heroine can just wave her hand and show any miracles in the game, and she can completely establish a new religion on the spot. This is not to mention the heroine's incredible luck. It was written on parchment that when the heroine was attacking the castle, a meteor suddenly fell from the sky and killed Count Jaeger. Linde didn't think it was impossible. As for the rebels brought by the heroine, it is more accurate to say that they are a group of refugees. Are those refugees? That's labor force. Linde just didn't know how to spend the money he just earned from Jefferson. If this place can accept the refugees brought by the heroine, the reclamation of the territory can be accelerated, including a lot of experiments that Linde has been thinking about. You can also expand boldly without worrying about occupying important population in the territory. What's more, whether it's from the game or from the fact that the heroine leads the refugees to rebel, the heroine is a rare management talent, so shouldn't she be squeezed hard? Thinking of this, Linde's lips became more tense than AK. Brother? Brother. Looking at Linde who had been wandering and suddenly starting to giggle, Reina reluctantly shook her hand at Linde worriedly. She was a little worried that Linde had been exhausted from managing the territory recently. But Linde suddenly came back to his senses and said to Reina with the same expression as when talking about business, Miss Lars, what do you think of the rebellious Isa? Seeing that Linde had returned to normal, Lena's hanging heart was relieved. She pulled up a chair and sat down easily and asked, what? Is that Isa Nebet a relative of yours? Almost. Linde chose to fool the past. After all, he inherited the attributes of the heroine, and it was acceptable to say that he was a relative. I want to arrange for her to come to the territory. You also know that the territory is short of people. Our grandfather's assistance cannot quench the thirst for nearness. But she is a rebel. Reina frowned slightly. Being able to rebel against a thief is also a military merit, and it is one of the indicators for Grand Duke Lars to evaluate his successor. In Reina's eyes, the heroine Isa is more like a walking military merit. Before, Reina went into the mountains every day not only to hunt, but also to find out if there were any mountain bandits and rebels around. But it's a pity that a group of fully armed professional cavalry is so conspicuous that Reina has never found anything. What's more, most of the bandits are actually the black gloves of the nobles. Who would be crazy enough to attack the granddaughter of the largest noble in the north? Although Reina objected, it was not a problem for Linde to convince Reina, and he started teasing the children directly. Miss Lars, do you think the people Isa brought are refugees? Hearing Linde's question, Reina was a little confused and replied, of course, although those people who killed Earl Jaeger are rebels, they are indeed refugees from the northern border. Then did our grandfather issue a relief order and give us food to help the refugees? That's right, I thought there wouldn't be any refugees coming to this remote territory. The grey and white collar workers naturally received a portion of the relief food distributed by Grand Duke Lars to the northern lords, but this one was more like what Grand Duke Lars gave to his granddaughter. After all, how could there be refugees coming to such a remote place? Grey collar. Then let me ask you, since the people Isa brought are refugees, and our grandfather issued an order that Lars people must help the refugees, should we rescue these refugees? Reina's brain was a little burned. The truth seemed to be this, but something was wrong. But they are also rebels. Reina suddenly had a flash of inspiration and pointed out the key to the problem. She just thought about the problem a little slowly, but she was not really stupid. Linde was a little shocked. This didn't fool him? It seemed that Reina was smarter than he thought. At least she wouldn't have to worry about being abducted when she went to the battlefield. Yes, they are rebels, so after they receive the relief food, I will punish them by working hard on my territory to repay the sins they have committed. Is there any problem? No. No. Reina always felt that something was wrong, but she couldn't say it. She pointed out that Isa's group of people were rebels before and it seemed that Reina had used up her memory today. As the rebel leader, Isa Nebet wants to be captured directly on the territory. As a prisoner, she will naturally have to work for us on the territory. Is there any problem? No, no. Seeing Lina with blank eyes and dull answers, Linde knew that he had succeeded in deceiving him. Then he was satisfied and started to call over Lori and Lila to discuss how to accept the refugees brought by Isa. When they heard that someone could share their work, they naturally agreed with Linde's proposal. Even Lila, who had always had a poker face, showed an evil smile on her face. This made Reina, who had been watching from the side, a little scared. She wanted to tell Linde that it was inhumane to treat prisoners like this, but obviously, it was too late. Chapter 16. At this time, Isa Nebet, the heroine of this game, or this world, is leading the refugees towards grey-collar jobs. Although a large number of refugees died when they captured Jaeger's castle and on the road, more and more refugees joined along the way. Just as Linde guessed, although Isa captured Earl Jaeger's castle, she was unable to hold it. When the news of Earl Jaeger's death and the capture of the castle spreads to the surrounding nobles' territories, the surrounding nobles will immediately hold high the banner of revenge for Jaeger and attack Isa, whether they really want revenge or fish in troubled waters. The nobles will get a share of the pie after capturing Isa. Unable to reproduce the miracle of the meteorite that day, Isa had no way to resist the attack of these nobles, so she simply gave up the sweet collar and began to march westward. Sure enough, when Isa gave up, the nobles did not rush to pursue Isa, but directly began to dismember the Liu Yi collar in Jaeger's castle and distribute the benefits. After getting the almost rotten grains that Jaeger had stored, Isha thought she could safely take the refugees to the west side of the northern border and settle down. However, as more and more refugees joined along the way, the grains were also destroyed. Consumption rapidly. Coupled with the suppression and harassment of some nobles along the way, by the time Isa was about to reach the grey-white collar, many people had been hungry for a long time. But fortunately, there were finally no nobles around, so Isa could settle down with peace of mind. Although I heard that there is a noble territory called Grey-White Collar not far away, that territory has just begun to develop, with a population of only a few hundred, and it is still a camping ground full of tents. This is also the reason why Isa chose to go west. This kind of small nobles does not have much help from professionals, and their combat effectiveness is generally not high. If there is a real conflict, the other party will be thankless. Nobles in their right minds will turn a blind eye to Isa's team of more than 1,000 people. The management of a team of more than 1,000 people made Isa feel physically and mentally exhausted, but fortunately, she had the help of the refugees who had captured the sweet territory. Those refugees had all seen the meteorites and fire rain falling from the sky, and they all thought that this was the goddess's purpose. The miracle that Isha showed, now they can be said to be absolutely loyal to Isha. Moreover, the old village chief who drank Isha's holy water miraculously recovered and was able to help Isha take some of the pressure off. Lord Saint, don't forget to send scouts out to check on the grey-collar worker. It was also the idea of a euro the old village chief named Jack to let Isa call herself a saint. There are so many rebel thieves in the north, and the church's control is not strong. Multiple rebel saints are basically a nuisance to the church. It's a small thing, but it goes a long way in helping Isha unite people. Don't worry, old village chief. I have arranged for Bruno to go there before. According to time, he will be back soon. Isa still seems to handle these small things with ease, but the current situation is not optimistic. At least most people are still hungry now, and they rely on everyone to huddle together for warmth at night. If the territory next door still only has tents, even a tent is a luxury for Isa now. As soon as Isa finished speaking, the man named Bruno, who was carrying a shovel, came back with two relatively strong-looking refugees. After burying his wife and children, Bruno got rid of his confused state. But Bruno, who had always been capable and never talked nonsense, was really embarrassed at this moment and didn't know how to speak in front of Isa. What's wrong, Bruno? Did you encounter any difficulties when you were investigating that grey-collar worker? Isa looked at Bruno with concern. Bruno didn't look like he was in danger, but rather like he had encountered something strange. My lady saint, do you think all nobles are really evil? Isa, who was puzzled by Bruno's confusing question, fell silent. Isa did not think that all nobles were evil. As Isa saw when she was studying in the royal capital, many nobles were just for appearances. Decent, but really caring about civilians. And although there are very few, there will be some nobles who are really fighting for the interests of the common people. At this time, Isa already had the concept of there will be no class that betrays the class, but there will be people who betray the class, but she couldn't summarize it yet. But what makes Isa strange is that the person who asked this question was Bruno, the man whose wife was played to death by the nobles and hung on the city wall, and whose child died after eating the spoiled food of the nobles. Maybe there will be, but at least we haven't encountered them along the way, right? Hearing Isa's answer, Bruno and the two scouts seemed to see hope, and finally told what he saw in the grey collar. Lord Saint, I saw that grey-white collar worker making porridge in our direction, and he also put up a sign. I am illiterate, but the literate scout I brought with me said it said receive a place where the Lars family provides food relief. Ah. Now it was Isa and the old village chief Jack's turn to be shocked. Is it true that there are nobles who would distribute relief grains? Don't worry, this may also be a conspiracy of the nobles. The well-informed old Jack did not directly believe what the scout said, and continued, look, that grey-collar worker only has a population of a few hundred. Even if he is really willing to give relief food, where will he give us more than 1,000 people? What about people's relief food? It can't be that Grand Duke Lars has been transporting supplies to that territory, right? Hearing this, Isa and the scouts also reacted. This is indeed incredible. Old Jack's speculation is more reasonable. But Isa felt that the grey and white-collared lords were not the type who could not negotiate. At least they had made a gentler gesture, so she planned to ask Bruno to see if he could contact the other party's lord. At this moment, the ground under Isa's feet suddenly began to shake, and many refugees began to become nervous, because they were familiar with it after escaping all the way. This was the lord's heavy cavalry dispatched. Although these heavy cavalry were generally just although they were driven away, the refugees were still left with an indelible fear. Prepare to meet the enemy. As Isha shouted, the refugees who had seen the miracles of meteorites began to maintain order in the camp. Considering that the opponent is a small territory with only a few hundred people, Isa believes that as long as her side does not mess up its position, it can make the opponent fearful with its numerical advantage. But soon Isa discovered that she was wrong, how wrong it was. The heavy cavalry troops came with 1 person and 3 horses, all wearing blue and white armor, holding enchanted spears and war hammers that exuded a shimmering light, and carrying ligers on their backs. A long bow made of animal tendons. Especially the leading female knight, the equipment cannot be said to be luxurious, it can only be said to be outrageous. It can be said that the defensive runes used in a castle have been moved to the armor. Even high-level professionals cannot even wear this suit. The most important thing is that their armors and cloaks are printed with the North Wind Bear, which represents the Lars family. They are the knights of the Lars family, and they are all professionals. I'm very sorry, holy lady, it's all because of me. Bruno blamed himself very much. This group of cavalry appeared immediately after he returned to the camp. It was obvious that his reconnaissance was discovered and the other party followed him directly. No, it's not your fault. The other party is much stronger than you. Isa fell into deep despair. Chapter 17. Although Linde has been reluctant to use Reina's knights, this does not mean that these knights who only follow Reina into the mountains to hunt and make water wheels every day are idiots. On the contrary, these are actually elites selected by Reina personally. In terms of class status, these knights are all nobles, people with real knighthoods, not ordinary soldiers. 50 professional heavy cavalry are a force that can move sideways even on the war-torn northern border. Not to mention facing a group of helpless refugees. This group of refugees couldn't even break through the defenses of these knights. So Isa felt deep despair at this moment. These were not the half-baked mercenaries in black gloves in Count Jaeger's castle, but real professional soldiers, the elite of the Lars family, the largest noble in the north. At this time, the leading female knight also moved. Because she was wearing a helmet, Isa could not see the expression of the female knight. She only felt that the female knight riding on the horse was full of oppression. All the rebels here are listening. The voice of the female knight, blessed by magic, resounded throughout the refugee camp. I am Lino Lars, the granddaughter of Grand Duke Lars. I am here to convey a message to you on behalf of the grey and white collar lords. Because the pressure of these knights was too terrifying, the refugees did not dare to make a sound. Even Isa was very nervous, especially when the leading female knight called the refugees rebels. Although you are rebels, you are also refugees. According to the relief order issued by my grandfather, grey and white collar are obliged to provide you with relief, so you can go to the grey and white collar camp not far away to receive food relief. Reina's words made the refugees stunned. Why did she call herself a rebel just now, and now she was asked to receive relief food? Before Isa came forward to ask, Reina continued to shout, although I gave you relief food, you are rebels after all, so the grey and white collar lords decided that you must stay in the grey area after receiving the relief food. White collar jobs, pay for your sins with labor. You can only take care of 2 meals a day, and you are only allowed to rest 1 day a week on prayer day. Only on prayer day can you drink broth. At this point, the entire refugee camp became so quiet that you could hear a pin drop. Isa, who wanted to say something, forgot to come forward to negotiate and stood there blankly. But Reina was a little stuck. Although she confidently promised that the things that Linde arranged for her to explain before departure would be conveyed, Reina still inevitably became nervous when speaking in front of more than 1,000 people. At this moment, Susan next to her urged the horse on her crotch to come to Lena's side, and thoughtfully handed over a small piece of paper. Reina didn't feel embarrassed at all and read the words on the note aloud. You have to work from the first rooster crow in the territory until the sun goes down, and in order to atone for your sins, you are only allowed to do those jobs that others choose to leave and that don't pay much. In grey-collar work, all theft, bullying and robbery are not allowed. Any violation will be dealt with immediately as a traitor. I swear on the name of the Lars family that I will implement the above treaty resolutely. Those who want to receive relief food should think carefully. Reina tried her best to make her voice as majestic as possible, and after she finished speaking, Susan quietly stepped back, as if she was afraid that her behavior would affect the image of the eldest lady. In the north, Lars is an unavoidable surname. Lars, who has been entrenched in the north for hundreds of years, has accumulated deep prestige. Even if he has never left a village in his life, illiterate farmers know that the largest noble in the north is Lars. Long live the Lars family. Long live grey-collar workers. These refugees are simple. As soon as Reina named the Lars family, they immediately believed it. Even the most loyal refugees around Isa were a little shaken because they had just heard what Bruno said. No. The grey-collar workers in the distance are really preparing relief food. Looking at the refugees who had sunken eyes just now, a little desperate and helpless, their eyes suddenly brightened, and Reina didn't quite understand. In Reina's view, these conditions of Linde are too harsh. What kind of life are those people in the grey and white collars living now? Those who do heavy work can get 3 meals a day, and can rest as long as they finish the day's work. Extra work will get extra bonuses and work points. Not only will they have meat to eat on the prayer day, but they will also reward outstanding employees every week. And these refugees who are about to enter grey and white collar jobs cannot enjoy it, which is really too harsh. But these refugees didn't care about this, because Lina spoke in plain English, so they immediately understood, not only can the grey white collar receive relief food, but it also has the job of taking care of 2 meals a day. How is this a punishment? This is a reward. Moreover, the female knight in front of her is the granddaughter of Grand Duke Lars. How can she still deceive people by using the name of the Lars family? Seeing the increasingly fanatical and even out of control crowd, Isa looked at old Jack with helpless eyes, and old Jack nodded helplessly. If you have food, you are a mother. Now that things have come to this, we can only take one step at a time. Isa could only move forward quickly, walked up to Lina and said, Miss Lars, I am the leader of this group of refugees. I will help maintain order. Please take us to the grey white collar. Then Isa pointed to the side of the refugee camp and continued to plead with Rina, please forgive me. There are some wounded people who cannot move and the old and weak who have no strength. Could you please ask someone to bring a batch of food over here first? I will leave a group of people behind, and the rest will follow you to grey white collar. Rina nodded and looked sympathetically towards the direction Isa was pointing. There were some skinny old men, women, and children there. I will ask someone to bake some bread. Don't worry. The grey collar lord said that talents are the most important thing. You are the kindest and most generous nobleman I have ever met. Isa solemnly bowed to Rina using the etiquette she had learned in the royal capital. It doesn't have to be this way. Rina took off her helmet and said with some joy, in the royal capital, I was scolded as a disgrace to the nobility, but you were the first to praise me for my kindness. Isa was stunned. Isa, who didn't know much about the nobility, didn't know how many granddaughters Archduke Lars had, but the most famous one must be known even to Isa who studied with her head covered, Rina who was abandoned by the fourth prince. I also heard rumors about you when I was studying in the royal capital. I am very sorry that I slandered you at that time. Faced with Isa's sincere apology, Rina said calmly, all this has passed, don't take it to heart. One day, I will return to the capital to take back everything that belongs to me. Chapter 18. In order to cope with the influx of refugees, which was almost 2 or 3 times the population of the territory, Linde made preparations early. The most important one is to temporarily train a group of grassroots officials who can read and write briefly to register the refugees. As for the food issue, there is no need to worry. Not to mention that Linde Gang and Viscount Jefferson received the full payment of 20,000 silver leaf coins for the delivery, and there was still a lot of food left over from the food shipped by Archduke Lars. Just like Earl Jaeger, the nobles are not short of food, but there is a large amount of food rotting in the granary. The rest is a matter of sanitation. In addition to the temporary newly built toilets, the team leader led the team members to repeatedly emphasize to these refugees at the place where they receive relief food that they are not allowed to defecate casually. Violators will be disqualified from receiving food. Or more importantly, the tools for committing the crime will be confiscated. However, the actual implementation is relatively flexible. After all, the place where relief grains are distributed is on the periphery of the territory, which just fertilizes the land around the territory. The repeated emphasis is just to make these people have the awareness not to commit crimes anywhere after entering the territory. Because of Isa's help, these refugees were very obedient. I originally thought it would be difficult to accept refugees that were twice the population of the territory, but the process was much smoother than Linde imagined. Probably also because of the unique personality charm of the heroine Isa. It's an honor to meet you, Lord. Looking at Isa who was saluting him, Linde suddenly had a very absurd feeling. Even the heroine who had only studied in the royal capital for 3 years had a more standard saluting posture than Rina. Are you Isa Nebet, the white saint known to the refugees? Linde curiously circled around Isa. It's just a false name. Isa looked a little uncomfortable. Could it be that this young lord was willing to help others because he was interested in her? But thinking of the pots of plump wheat porridge, Isa decided that even if the lord in front of her planned to use force, she would just close her eyes and admit it. But what he imagined didn't happen. Linde's eyes showed more of curiosity than evil thoughts. The White Saint was a title given to the heroine by the Vatican in the original game. Unexpectedly, the heroine used this title again. At this moment, Linde had some doubts that the world did have a mechanism to repair the world line by itself. And in the game, whenever the heroine is in critical moments, in addition to the mysterious miracle, a young, handsome and mysterious man will always appear to help the heroine avert the danger. Linde was a little curious whether there was such a man beside the current heroine. After all, the territory was in a period of employment. What's wrong? Lord. Isa really couldn't stand being stared at. Linde's eyes were like looking at a rare animal. Sorry, I'm just curious about what kind of person can lead refugees to capture an earl's castle. This was not an excuse. Linde was very curious about what happened after the heroine deviated from the original world line, so he asked Isa to tell him what happened after she left the royal capital. It didn't matter. The more he talked about it, the more surprised Linde became. Especially when Isa, like a certain great mage in her previous life, relied on meteorites and celestial phenomena to conquer the enemy, the rumors turned out to be true. All I can say is that she really deserves to be the heroine. This is no ordinary good luck. Fortunately, she did not choose to be the enemy of the heroine. But what surprised Linde even more was the heroine Isa's new interpretation of the scriptures that could almost be regarded as heretical. After listening to Isa's new thoughts on the Church of the Goddess of Light, Linde tentatively asked Isa, Palace Jade Wine. What? Lord, do you want to drink? Isa looked at Linde with some confusion. Why did the Lord suddenly say such a sentence without any clue? Sure enough, the Lord who is willing to help refugees would be a little abnormal in his mind? Odd changes to even and stays the same. Linde was unwilling to give up and asked the second question. This time Isa did not answer, but looked at Linde the way Linde usually looked at Rina. Sorry, forget the 2 sentences just now. Linde held his forehead and shook his head. If you think about it carefully, although Isa's thought is very close to liberation theology, it can be seen that it is still very immature. There are many places that have not been clearly summarized, and it does not emphasize secularization like liberation theology. Although it can be attributed to the fact that there is a God in this world, he had to make adjustments, but looking at Isa's eyes that looked at the fool with a mixture of sympathy and confusion, Linde felt that he was indeed overthinking. The only time traveler should be the one who took over the identity of the heroine in the royal capital. Lord, I believe in the new canon that all nobles are bad people. Even those nobles in the royal capital are mostly hypocritical. But after meeting you, I fell into confusion. Could it be that my previous ideas were all wrong? Of course, Isa did not regret killing Count Jaeger before, she was just really confused, and as a heroine, her intuition told her that the lord in front of her might be able to explain the things she encountered along the way. Many questions. At this moment, even though he had checked many secret codes over and over again, Linde still doubted whether the heroine had been tricked by someone traveling through time. This already involves class theory. Isa, the original heroine, is more advanced than Linde, a person who has traveled through the new world. On the contrary, Linde himself is becoming more and more accustomed to the role of a feudal lord. Seeing Linde's silence, Isha didn't force it and was ready to stand up and leave. Etc. Although it was only for a moment, Linde thought a lot. Will using these thoughts now be beneficial or harmful to himself and the world? Linde shook his head. When did he become so selfish? Or is it that after sitting in this position for a long time, he really only considers the pros and cons when doing things? First of all, you have to understand what class is. There was no weighing, only impulse. Linde planned to help Isha improve some of her theories. After all, Linde was afraid that he would not be able to say anything in the future and would not dare to say anything. While he still had the courage now, some things had to be done. No matter what happens in the future, no matter whether the Dragon Slayer actually turns into an evil dragon in the future, these ideas must be spread. The original liberation theology did not have a clear class theory position, but they would analyze the class contradictions in the social structure and advocate class struggle for the realization of social liberation. Linde combined these views, plus some phenomena that originally existed in this world, to introduce class theory to Isa. When talking about the aristocracy's natural active or passive exploitation of serfs, Isa raised objections. But Lord, aren't you an exception? Linde couldn't explain to Isa that there was actually no essential difference between himself and those nobles. He just said with a guilty conscience, this is the question you asked at the beginning. What I want to tell you is that although there is no class that betrays the class, but there are individuals who betray the class. To be honest, Linde didn't think he was worthy of this sentence, because he just didn't exploit him so ruthlessly, but just like that, those people in the territory were still grateful to Linde. The road must be walked step by step, and the meal must be eaten one bite at a time. Linde's actions can be considered progress in this world full of monsters and monsters, but Linde has always felt that he has not done enough and has not dared to slack off. After hearing this answer, Isha seemed to have opened up the two channels of Ren and Du through the combination of class theory, and instantly figured out many things. Isa, just like someone who was clear and a little stupid when studying physics, she immediately started to draw inferences. Since you say society is made up of conflicting classes, what about the contradictions between these classes? Out of line. Linde pinched his Qingming point, a little unsure of how to answer Isa's question. It's not that the contradiction is that Linde hasn't studied it, but that he doesn't have the original version of liberation theology. It's not that there really isn't one, but liberation theology has no fixed position on contradictions like class, and it doesn't deny the existence of supernatural power. Some people will put their hope of resolving contradictions in this power while fighting. And this world really has supernatural power. He had no choice but to go beyond the scope of liberation theology, talk about the theory of contradiction, and tell Isa that the development of things spirals in contradictions, and what are the main contradictions and what are the secondary contradictions, although they are all minor contradictions. The content she learned in middle and high school politics classes still gave Isa an enlightenment. To be honest, Linde was already sweating profusely at this point, but Isa's questions were not over yet. So if things continue to develop, is it possible to build a world where everyone is truly equal? A euro and how to achieve this world. This classmate, please don't ask questions that even the author can't solve. That's what she said, but Isa was keenly aware that Linde must have something else to say. According to etiquette, both parties should have stopped talking. After all, judging from Linde's expression, he really didn't want to discuss this topic anymore. The conversation continued. Lord, I'm afraid you haven't finished explaining your thoughts yet. But Isa felt that it was not enough. The theory of class and contradictions taught by Linde directly explained the various problems that Isa saw along the way. There are definitely people behind this methodology who have practiced it. Now it seems that Linde only talked about a set of internal skills. The mental skills also need to be matched with real external skills to form a complete combo. That is true dragon slaying. With the internal skills and inner skills, coupled with Isa's own practice, it was only a matter of time before she understood the external skills. Linde didn't know whether it was good or bad to talk to the heroine about these. In the end, in order to prevent the heroine from going crazy, he decided to use this set internal skills and mental techniques are taught to the heroine. After Linde had done some ideological work for himself, he turned to the heroine Isa and said, "That's it, I will tell you the complete story now. I just hope that if you cause trouble in the future, you will not tell me about being a teacher. That's it." Linde is serious. After telling some things, I am afraid that some smart nobles will really cut him into pieces. The heroine will be fine if she has the protection of the goddess luck, but she does not. Chapter 19. After the first cock crow of the grey collar worker, Isha got up on time. Because of Linde and Reina's special care, Isa was assigned a tent alone. I don't know if it was because of the comfortable tent with soft cushions or because she finally settled down, but Isa had a rare good sleep. Linde and Isa chatted very late last night. In addition to the theory of class and contradiction, they mainly discussed some secularization issues of the goddess of light, that is, the part of liberation theology. Of course, at the end of the discussion, although the two had proposed many measures for secularization, Linde did not agree to build a church on the territory in the end. It's not that it can't be done, it's that it can't be done now. And Linde arranged a more important job for Isa. Good morning, do you want breakfast? Let's go. The brick moving task I took on yesterday is not over yet. I can still have another breakfast today. On the road, two sturdy young men were walking towards the place where breakfast was distributed, talking and laughing. Isa saw that the refugees she brought yesterday had also gotten up and were looking at the two men who went to have breakfast with envious eyes. They had just arrived in the territory and could only choose a job at the end. Although they could eat 2 meals a day, they were not as good as these hard laborers. In the eyes of these refugees, those are not hard jobs, but jobs that can earn more food, and everyone will only rush to do them. Linde also implemented a work point system among these refugees, but what was different from those before was that most of the original household registrations of this group of refugees could no longer be tested, so Linde classified these refugees into one category. Except for some people who are craftsmen or other skilled people, the remaining people have to work for a period of time and accumulate a certain amount of work points before they can officially become citizens. Almost everyone has no opinion on this. It is better to say that these refugees are already very satisfied with the status quo, not to mention that as long as they work hard, they can become free citizens. Seeing the treatment of those formal citizens, these refugees will only work harder. There are also many people who have been craftsmen who plan to try their luck with the relevant person in charge. Isa saw that Bruno had also gotten up early and was making the magical water wheel with a few refugees. It is not difficult to invent a similar device, but even if other nobles invented it, it would probably be a toy for people's entertainment. Only the grey and white collar lords actually used this device in agriculture. Next to Bruno, an official named Lori, who was suspected to be the Lord's guard, was circling Bruno just like the Lord last night, praising Bruno as a good soldier, and kept asking Bruno if he wanted to take his hands off working underneath. But the honest and somewhat dull Bruno was just curious about the keel water wheel in his hands. Good morning, Teacher Nebet. Isa looked back at the source of the sound and found that it was Rena who was riding a weird two-wheeled device to say hello to her. Miss Lars, please stop teasing me. The job Linde arranged for Isa was to be a teacher in the territory, and she was also the principal of the first school in the territory. Rena didn't feel anything wrong with this punishment, because in Rena's impression, her teachers were usually tortured so much in the end that they even regretted becoming a teacher and cried to their grandfather that they wanted to resign. I'm going to have breakfast, do you want to come with me? After speaking, Rena patted the back seat of her bicycle. No, I am also a rebel who needs to atone for my sins, and I don't need to do heavy physical work. How can I go to have breakfast? Isa refused resolutely, but Rena said nonchalantly, if you don't want to, forget it and come back to me when you are hungry. Just now I heard Linde say that BD Jaeger really deserves to die. He didn't listen to Grandpa's order, but after all, you killed a noble. After speaking, Rena gave a thumbs up and said to Isa, I will reform well in school and try to get out as soon as possible. If you have any difficulties, tell me. Afterwards, Rena rode her bicycle and left gracefully with a large number of riders who were also riding bicycles. Isa was in a daze. This jealous woman, the shame of the nobility, and the despicable scoundrel from the north, who was widely rumored in the capital, seemed so easygoing and obviously not a bad person. Although it seems that my brain is not working very well. But it is said that the magical water wheels on the territory were designed by this noble man, which is really hard to see through. Not all of the 1,000 refugees have been handed over. There are still many refugees waiting to be registered at the place where they receive relief food. However, most of them are already full, so they are not as hungry as when they first arrived yesterday. Anxious. There were many grassroots officials holding large speakers made of paper and holding wooden signs to explain the rules and regulations of the territory to the refugees. Isa also squatted down among the crowd and listened carefully. No wonder Isa had heard from the old village chief Jack that there were so many rules in this territory. In grey and white collar, even the lord had to take care of going to the toilet. The nobles all have some strange habits, and they especially like to make some abstract requests. Before, Isa saw a viscountess asking her gardener to cut the petals of all the flowers in the manor into the same number. But the grey collar regulations don't give people this feeling. These regulations are not the lord's whims or strange habits, but regulations that will really benefit the people of the territory. Not long after, Rena's water-powered forging hammer was finally completed thanks to the hard work of the knights. Isa also came to the river to watch this magical tool designed by the so-called lord and his wife. Looking at the transmission mechanism and forging hammer that began to work as the water wheel rotated, Isa's eyes lit up. This was a machine that could be driven without any magic power, just like the water wheels in the territory. It turned out that even without relying on magic, can humans do such an almost incredible thing? The exposed transmission mechanisms are linked to each other, like a beautiful dynamic picture, making everyone present unable to take their eyes away. Even the knights who were used as hard labor by Rena looked at the results of their work in shock at this moment. Linde was also very shocked, but it was not because of the hydraulic forging hammer. Although Linde was somewhat excited when he saw the hydraulic forging hammer successfully started, what shocked Linde even more was that the alchemy material was really useful. Although it is expensive, it perfectly meets the standards given by Linde. The strength of the forging hammer is uniform and stable, and the speed change and transmission are very smooth. As long as the follow-up maintenance is proper, I am afraid that this hydraulic forging hammer will not be a problem for 180 years. These materials have even reached the standards of modern materials science. Linde once heard this sentence before traveling through time: all problems encountered by modern science are materials science problems. But now the material problem has been solved in a simple and crude way. Could it be said that as long as they have magic power, those magicians can even rub their hands into a greenhouse to create superconductors? It may be an exaggeration to say this, but the materials created by alchemists using magic power in this era must have far exceeded the needs of this era. Reina on the side saw that the hydraulic forging hammer that she and the knights had worked so hard for so long was successfully activated. She hugged Linde excitedly and shouted, "Brother, I succeeded. We succeeded." Lina was always wearing armor. Linde stumbled and almost lost his balance. After spinning twice to lose strength, he touched Lena's head and said, "Yes, Miss Lars, you are simply a genius. With this, we can consider large-scale production of armor." Being able to think of the general idea of a hydraulic forging hammer without having seen one before, and being able to put it into practice, Rina is definitely a first-class engineering genius. When she heard someone sincerely praise her, she was so excited that tears filled the corners of Reina's eyes. Lina has had a lot of wild ideas since she was a child, but due to her status, most of Lena's classes are etiquette classes. In this area, Lina really has no talent, and she has never been very good at observing words and expressions, so there is nothing wrong with her. Politically savvy, none of the royal family members, including the fourth prince, gave Reina a good look. Linde was the first person besides Archduke Lars to support Lena's wild thoughts. This made Lina feel that she had found a confidant, and excitedly said to Linde, "When I return to the capital, I must let my brother you become prime minister so that you can support me in doing these messy things." After hearing this, Linde could only respond with an awkward but polite smile. Unexpectedly, Reina was still thinking about this matter, watching Reina tirelessly talk about what she would do when she returned to the royal capital in the future. Linde suddenly wanted to take back his previous sentence. Chapter 20. Thanks to the newly arrived population, many arduous tasks were gradually reduced. After reclaiming wasteland, there was finally enough manpower to support Linde in carrying out some production plans. It's not like Linde has never thought about abandoning reclamation, directly building a large number of handicraft workshops, and starting a capitalist model. Although this idea can make money quickly, it is basically a loft in the sky, unless Linde intends to rely on the support of the Lars family. And now, among other things, the assembly line for making snowflake candy has been rolled out. Needless to say, the advantages of the assembly line model compared to traditional manual workshops are of course the most important thing is that there is basically no need to worry about leaks, even if one or two staff members are bribed. Of course, Linde does not expect that in this world of alchemy the formula and production method of snowflake candy can be kept secret for how long. After all, this is just the first pot of gold. It is impossible to really make money from this in the future, not to mention that sugar is important. Strategic resources must be given priority to the territory when it develops. Compared to sugar, Linde is more concerned about the production of cement. After all, it is impossible for more than 1,000 people in the territory to sleep in tents. In this world, except for the castles and palaces of nobles, the materials used by most people to build houses are very primitive. They are basically made of wood, stone, and some mud. Building a two-story building is a big project, and it is slow to build. Not to mention, a large number of professional craftsmen are needed. Making cement by local methods is actually very simple, even simpler than making sugar. In his previous life, Linde once saw the man downstairs pouring local cement at the door because of a leak in his home. But Linde actually still wants industrial cement more. In those time travel novels, the protagonist easily makes industrial cement by relying on his past life memories and then immediately starts vigorously developing infrastructure. After all, even if ordinary people know how to make industrial cement, there are so many processes such as grinding, mixing, and calcining at high temperatures. Under such obstacles, it will be difficult to achieve mass production in a short period of time. Not to mention that industrial cement is not concrete, it is just a material for making concrete. It is impossible to achieve infrastructure miracles without concrete. However, industrial cement Linde was just thinking about it. In fact, local cement has already achieved dimensionality reduction in this era, and it is extremely cost-effective. Because there is the River of Tears in the middle of the territory, it can even be used directly from local materials. What's more, there are no buildings in the territory that require the use of industrial cement. Just start building with cement and stones. It is simple and efficient, and can be said to be seamlessly connected with craftsmen who have experience in building houses. Fortunately, the research and development of cement went very smoothly, and it was not fundamentally different from the previous life like boiling water. This world is not a disordered world, but also follows the basic law, but it only needs to add the variable of magic power. The biggest problem now is that the quality of the local cement used to build roads is not very good. If Reina takes her knights fully armed and walks back and forth for 2 times, the road made of local cement may start to be unable to withstand it. Of course, it's just that I can't withstand it. It's not to the point where it can't be used. Compared with the dirt road, it's already a dimensionality reduction blow. What's more, the fully armed Reina and the knights are already heavy cavalry, even because they are professionals and have warcraft. The overall load of the bloodline horses is much heavier than the heavy cavalry in Linde's previous life. The situation that requires the use of these knights and equipment is completely unusual, so you can ignore it for the time being. In this way, after all the more than 1,000 refugees were naturalized, the cement factory by the River of Tears officially started construction. The old craftsmen were really surprised when they saw the cement, but they were not amazed at how strong the cement was after it dried, but they were surprised that the Lord would actually use such a precious alchemy material to build houses and schools for civilians. People can't imagine things they haven't seen. In the understanding of these old craftsmen, cement is the mysterious alchemy material in the Lord family. It can't be made of clay and sand that can be seen everywhere, even if they saw it with their own eyes. In the process of making cement, one would only think that the Lord, the hidden master of alchemy, had cast some magic or secretly put some magical powder into it. Seeing this group of craftsmen prostrate on the ground, Linde had to lament that compulsory education still has a long way to go. Along with cement, research began on gunpowder. Because it was a very important project, Linde did not hand it over directly to Lori or Lila, but took over the management himself. The staff who made the gunpowder were basically old people from Linde's territory, so there is no need to say much about their loyalty. Moreover, this is the only place in the territory where Linde has hired Reina's knights to protect her. Although those knights are eager to look at people with their nostrils, they can be said to be absolutely loyal to Reina's orders. Linde did not hide the research on gunpowder from Reina. It is better to say that Linde would report to Reina every night about everything in the territory, regardless of whether Reina was interested or not. Even if Reina said the first syllable of Linde, I fell asleep after that. It's a matter of attitude. Although Lina is unobtrusive, there must be Grand Duke Lars's spy by her side. Even if it is just a pretense, Lina cannot be completely excluded from the management of the territory. Originally, Linde had prepared for the worst, that is, gunpowder, like steam, would not work in this world and would be interfered by the power of elements. After all, gunpowder is different from cement and can really produce flames. Like steam, it was tempered by the water element, so everything had to be overturned, but the process went surprisingly smoothly. Even because the purchased materials have been refined through alchemy, their purity is even higher. As soon as the research began, Linde made something similar to a firecracker. Even though the staff were already used to the magical alchemy material of their lord, after seeing what they needed with their own hands blowing up a steel basin, they still looked at Linde with awe and fear in their eyes. I don't know if magic was added, but the lord did use these magic-free materials to create the same effect as magic. No wonder the management regulations of this gunpowder field are stricter than any other place in the territory, even more stringent than those in Linde's big tent. If you are not careful, your arm may be blown off. But Susan, who was watching on the sidelines, really yawned. An explosion of this level is only loud but not very powerful. It can be used to scare people. The actual effect may not be as good as a first-level magic scroll. As a fourth-level professional, Susan, as long as she is fully armed, can bathe in these explosions. And it was quite troublesome to use. Susan really didn't understand the use of Linde's research on this thing. It is normal to have this kind of thinking. Before Susan saw the mass production of explosives with her own eyes and their use in industrialized mining, she would not have been able to imagine those scenes, even if Susan had seen magic that was even more exaggerated than those scenes. How long does it take to train a mage who can use magic to mine mines? How much does it cost to rent one? The mage also needs to rest to replenish his magic power, but explosives are not used. Your magic is running out, but my explosives are endless. What's more, this is just a local method of gunpowder. As the saying goes, mononitrate, disulfide, and charcoal, add some sugar to make it big. If it can be successfully granulated, Linde can even bring the technological level of gunpowder to modern times in a short period of time. The remaining problem is the blunderbuss. Linde was not a gunpowder enthusiast in his previous life, and he knew so much about gunpowder only because the formula of gunpowder was as well known as the notice at the crossroads, but the gunpowder was different. Moreover, in order to make a gun close to modern times, the first thing to solve is the problem of smokeless gunpowder. Black powder is already the limit of Linde's understanding, and beyond that is Linde's knowledge blind spot. Thinking of this, Linde suddenly looked at Reina, who was dozing off while listening to his report. It would not be like making water wheels everywhere. He had just provided Reina with an idea, and they could directly design the finished firearm, right? Impossible, absolutely impossible. Firearms are not simple machines like hydraulic forging hammers. Even if Reina has any ideas, it will probably take a long time to test them. Forget it, Linde laughed at his unreliable idea and decided to start researching firearms down to earth. There are only two research directions, flintlock guns and percussion guns. In addition to the different ignition methods, these two types of guns have higher requirements for gunpowder. You can study flintlock guns first, lay the foundation, and then slowly update the ignition device and gunpowder to the percussion gun. After all, percussion guns were used in history. It is improved on the basis of the flintlock gun. It is definitely right to start research in this direction. Of course, you can try to use customized alchemy materials in one step and directly force the bricks to fly, but this method is definitely not mass-produced, so you can only make a prototype first for Linde to play with. But these are all things for later. The most important issue now is to free up the gunpowder that can be put into production. First. Chapter 21. The research on cement and gunpowder in grey-collar workers gradually got on the right track, especially cement, which directly accelerated the development of grey-collar workers. Many original tents were demolished, and people began to build new houses. Next, Linde is going to start researching chain steel. This is a big job, but because the grey-collar workers have not yet found iron ore, Linde has not brought this item into his daily routine before. Now, Linde plans to see how steel chains are made in this world. As long as steel can be produced in the territory, then with the addition of hydraulic forging hammers, future military needs will definitely be met. The craftsmen in the territory are now mainly craftsmen from the Lars family who followed Reina to Grey Collar. Many of them are even low-level professionals. The place where chain steel is now is not so much a chain steel factory as a blacksmith shop. In the beginning, there was not even a blacksmith shop. Linde still arranged work for these craftsmen, although the work content was limited to repairing tools for the residents every day. Today I heard that the Lord was coming due to jet lag. These craftsmen were all working hard and preparing to perform well. After all, this Lord really threw money away when something happened, even though it was all the Lars family's money. But after the craftsmen showed their chain steel method, they saw that the Lord seemed to be out of shape, and left the chain steel factory after a brief inspection. The old craftsman, who originally thought that the Lord would come up with all kinds of fanciful machinery and improvement methods like he did to other craftsmen before, touched his beard and reflected on whether he had done something wrong and made the Lord unhappy. Otherwise, how would he feel about the Lord? Adults treat them a little differently. After returning to the tent, Linde began to spin around in circles, and kept flipping through the Rune Magic Circle introductory manual in his hand, and started to study according to the memory of the original owner. It's too exaggerated. Although Linde has been giving this world a little shock in his previous life, this time it was the twisted technology tree of this world that gave Linde a little magic shock. Linde imagined that there are many ways to improve the chain steel technology in this world, such as blast furnace chain steel. He had read so many time travel novels, and even if he couldn't operate it, he could talk about it and inspire these craftsmen, but he didn't expect it. In this world, someone came to break all laws with one force. The temperature is not enough. Heating is too slow. Impurities are easily produced. With a burning magic circle, a few first and second level rune masters can directly use the rune magic circle to heat up and violently solve all problems. Of course, this is easier said than done. Rune magic arrays can only be controlled by rune masters who have learned runes. Rune masters themselves are also professionals, not just a cabbage. Moreover, rune magic arrays require constant fine-tuning and maintenance, and the cost is not high. Not low. Basically it can only be used for chain steel and has no practical significance. But this still gave Linde a little shock from another world. There was even a moment when Linde doubted whether everything he did was really meaningful, and whether there was already other magic in the world that could perfectly replace his own plan. For example, have cement and gunpowder actually had superior substitutes for a long time? Judging from Lena's reaction, there shouldn't be, but it was Lena after all. The worried Linde went to find Isa again, and after asking in detail, he felt a little relieved. Afterwards, Linde took Reina into the Titan Mountain range. Because today is the day of experimental gunpowder mining. Although Reina had been hunting and playing in the mountains before building the hydraulic forging hammer, she was not doing anything serious. The Titan Mountain still had a lot of mineral deposits. What Linde came to now was the jade that Reina had just discovered not long ago. Corundum veins. Although the scale is not large, to be honest, Linde's main purpose of opening the mine now is just to practice gunpowder mining. There are many mineral deposits in the Targan Mountains, but because the place is relatively remote and transportation costs are high, they have not been effectively developed. In addition, the Solder area north of the snow-broken territory in the north not only has higher quality ore, but also has more convenient transportation, and transportation roads are extending in all directions. No one will be willing to come to the Targan Mountains to mine at higher costs. Especially when the elves on the other side of the mountain would jump out from time to time and ask for a share of the pie. And with the overall decline of the Cape Tien Kingdom and the increasingly arrogant and luxurious life of the upper-class nobles, fewer and fewer professionals are willing to come to this corner and work hard to use their magic power to help the nobles mine every day. After instructing a craftsman to use a chisel to dig a large hole at the designated location, Linde ordered someone to put the explosives in, and then stepped back dozens of meters away to direct the ignition of the fuse. Because no craftsman dared to take on this job at the beginning, Susan, who was beside Lena, impatiently came to the lead. Susan was too concerned about the power of these explosives at the level of a firecracker that blew up an iron pot at first, and didn't think it was scary at all. After snapping her fingers, the fuse began to burn blazingly, and then she made a pose and he waved his cloak and walked towards the bunker where Reina was. Boom! Powerful air waves swept over, like an angry dragon roaring past, shaking the mountains so that stone fragments flew everywhere, and deafening explosions echoed across the mountains. The unsuspecting Susan was thrown forward by the thrust generated by the explosion. The defensive runes on the armor were directly judged as being attacked and began to operate at full capacity. Protect the eldest lady. The knights around Reina instantly raised their shields and formed a formation. The explosion was beyond their understanding. They thought it was the enemy of the Lars family who was attacking. As the flickering firelight and the smoke extinguished, a messy scene came into view. The rocks were blown to pieces, and huge rock blocks collapsed like fortresses. Linde looked at the dumbfounded Susan and the knights facing the enemy with satisfaction. It seemed that his previous worries were unnecessary. Although there were many things in this world that were beyond his knowledge, it seemed that gunpowder was still far beyond this. The invention of the world. Record the amount used in this explosion and the effect of mining. After reminding the stunned craftsman behind him, Linde began to observe the explosion site. These gravels are also collected and can be used with cement as building materials. However, remember to remind the workers to sort them first. Looking at the knights who were still waiting in formation, Linde just smiled slightly. The knights looked around and then put down their shields in embarrassment. But Reina, who was supposed to be chirping and asking Linde how he did it, was now stroking her chin and starting to think under the protection of the knights. Brother. Reina came to Linde excitedly, but she did not show the shocked expression that Linde expected. Reina's mind started to spin again. Can you tell me whether this so-called explosive can be launched using magic? For example, if you use the second-level strong wind technique to send this explosive to the enemy and ignite it, isn't that equivalent to using a second-level magic to create a fourth-level or even stronger magical power? Linde blinked and made sure that he had seen correctly. The person in front of him was indeed Reina. Why is this kid so smart again today? He is already thinking about using gunpowder combined with magic to make a magical version of the cannon. Before Linde could speak, Reina continued, the strong wind technique is not enough. We should find a more powerful magic that can be delivered accurately. Have you actually thought of the prototype of a missile? No, this method is not practical at all. High-level magic is used for ultra-long distance delivery. Why not just use high-level magic to strike? Reina dismissed her plan without thinking about it, and then she looked at the craftsmen around Linde. Is it possible to reduce the weight of the so-called gunpowder you made, brother, and stuff it into stones, so that the stones can explode like magic when thrown out, and in this case, the stone fragments can also injure the enemy? Linde looked at Reina in surprise. Did he think of fragmentation grenades so quickly? And this time Reina was no longer obsessed with using magic to cooperate. At this time, Susan, who got up from the ground in embarrassment, said, but miss, if you reduce the weight, you will not be able to cause effective harm to high-level professionals. How many high-level professionals does a noble have? Reina looked at her knights. Most of them were third-level professionals, a little worse than Linde. However, among their peers, they were already considered geniuses. With that equipment, they were in chaos. It is the most terrifying killing machine. Susan, the power of the explosion just now has been reduced to 1/5 of its original size. Do you think you can resist it head-on? Facing Lena's inquiry, Susan tapped the shield on her wrist and said confidently, if it's a frontal attack, I'm confident that I won't get hurt even if I block it 5 or 6 times. Then Reina looked at Linde again. So brother, how much gunpowder can the territory produce in a day? If all the chain gold equipment and workers on the territory are used to produce gunpowder, it is estimated that ordinary soldiers can use gunpowder continuously, right? After speaking, Reina also explained in detail the production situation of the remaining alchemy materials and gunpowder in the territory. Susan on the side closed her mouth. What she just said was about using a shield to block the front. When she thought that this kind of weapon could be used by ordinary people, and there might be several people, Susan started to break out in a cold sweat. Yes, high-level professionals are not cabbages. The eldest lady, a 6th-level professional, is already a genius-level player that is rare to see in a century. Linde did not answer, but walked around Reina, as if he wanted to see if Reina was possessed by something. What's wrong, brother? Is there something wrong with what I said? Reina drew circles on the ground with her feet unconfidently. No, exactly. Linde encouraged, to be honest, there are many ideas that I haven't even thought of yet. You have done a good job. I will carefully consider the plans you mentioned. The beginning and end are completely correct. To be honest, the correctness is a bit exaggerated. You must know that the gunpowder in the original world also went through a long period of research and practice before it truly became the master of the battlefield. However, Reina only watched the gunpowder mine once. Concluded and predicted the future of gunpowder, and Linde even felt that Reina was more like a time traveler than himself. After all, in this world where magic is real, Linde can't guarantee whether gunpowder can really have the status it had on the battlefield in its previous life, but Reina's vision is not only not bound by magic, she even relies on magic to start studying gunpowder. How to use? Reina is not only a genius in engineering, she might also be a natural. General. Chapter 22. When the grey-collar workers began to engage in large-scale development, Lilith Dowling, the new saint in the royal capital, had just concluded a charity event. My dear, why don't you take a rest first? The 4th Prince Kellen looked at the tired Lilith with some distress. It doesn't matter, Your Highness, I can still hold on. As long as I'm by your side, endless strength surges out of my heart. Lilith's pitiful look made Crane even more distressed, and then she waved her hand. You don't have to attend the next dance. Just have a good rest here. This is an order from the future king. You are not allowed to disobey. Then Crane shouted to Lilith's maids, let the saint have a good rest, do you understand? But Your Highness, the next dance is held by the Grand Duke of the West. I think as a member of the future royal family, I have to attend. Although she was very tired, Lilith didn't want to miss the next dance because the next dance was held for her by another male protagonist, the eldest son of the Grand Duke of the West. If she didn't go, it might affect her favorability. I don't want you to feel it, I want me to feel it. After saying that, Crane Augustine put on a handsome look and left without looking back. Lilith's maids all watched the domineering 4th prince leave with trepidation. But as the 4th prince disappeared from sight, the maids immediately relaxed. Several maids came to Lilith, who had already crossed her legs, carrying tea drinks that had been chilled by freezing magic. Lilith took a big gulp, the expression on her face began to relax, she opened her chest and kept fanning the wind with her hands. MD, I'm exhausted from talking all day long. What bullshit the future king is, he's so greasy. While enjoying the massage from the maids, Lilith complained, if it weren't for being the future queen, I would be too lazy to care about you. The maids immediately flattered him, that's right, how can a prince who has not ascended the throne be worthy of our saintly lady? Your Highness Kellen should at least wait until he officially succeeds to the throne. Feeling the exquisite massage techniques of the maids and the expensive iced tea in her hands, Lilith's thoughts returned to the time when she first traveled through time 3 years ago. Lilith was still very nervous when she first traveled through time, but she was also a little excited to actually travel into the otome game she had played in her previous life. Although he didn't travel through time and became a heroine, he just traveled through time and became a small aristocrat, but no matter what, at least he was in the same college as the male and female protagonist. Moreover, it traveled back to before the male and female protagonists met. When Lilith deliberately delayed the heroine and prevented the heroine from meeting a male protagonist, Lilith realized that the plot of the game could really be changed at will. But the more changes there are, the more likely things will happen that Lilith doesn't expect. After all, Lilith's biggest advantage is her knowledge of the subsequent plot. If the plot is changed beyond recognition due to her butterfly effect, she will lose her advantage of knowing the subsequent plot. So Lilith had a bold idea, that is, to replace the heroine's plot by herself. In this way, the original plot would not change, and Lilith could make perfect use of her own advantages. Things went very smoothly. Lilith succeeded in meeting various male protagonists one step ahead of the heroine ISA every time, and then followed the options in the game to gain favor with the male protagonists. In the end, Lilith not only maxed out her favorability points, including those of the fourth prince, and achieved a reverse harem ending, she also avoided the influence of the original heroine on her and allowed the original heroine to return to her hometown to farm. As for the final boss in the game, Lino Lars, Lilith very wickedly married her to a young nobleman with the same name as her brother in her previous life. However, the life after the ending is not as beautiful as Lilith imagined. The story is not like the fairy tale. The prince and the princess lived a happy life. Lilith, who became the fiancé copyrightee of the fourth prince, had to attend a large number of dances and social events with the fourth prince every day. Not only that, because of her status as a saint, Lilith also participated in many decision-making meetings of the Holy See. Meetings, endless meetings, and entertainments tore Lilith's imagination of a better life to pieces. And in order to maintain her persona, Lilith can only speak with a raised voice every day, and her true colors will only be revealed when she is alone with her personal maid. Although the fourth prince Kellen told Lilith not to attend the next dance, looking at the schedule handed over by the maid, there was a joint meeting between the Cape Tien Kingdom and the Holy See to attend after the next dance. There is not even a mobile phone in this world, and there is no way to fish during meetings. This made Lilith cover her head in pain, but she quickly regained consciousness. Please tidy up, the next meeting is about to begin. After Lilith finished speaking, the maids quickly took action. The clothes that the prince and concubine wore for various occasions were different from the clothes that the saint wore for various meetings, and they were very cumbersome. Lilith felt that she spent a lot of time every day wasted on getting dressed. The life of this otome world is simply more painful than the life of a social animal. Lilith has long been tired of seeing the faces of the male protagonists who are like male public relations. Now she only feels that the male protagonists are greasier than the Huang leader. Thinking of this, Lilith couldn't help but feel nostalgic for the days when she wore a little vest and played games with her brother at home in her previous life. Although the two of them made bad faces to each other every day, and the brother kept complaining that she couldn't get married like this. It was extremely easy, and my brother was really helpful when he had something to do. My brother helped me clear the combat part of this game at that time. It's a pity that my brother later took the first step because of his courage. Soon after, Lilith followed the fourth Prince Crane in a special holy nun costume to attend the joint meeting of the Cape Kingdom and the Holy See of the Goddess of Light. Lilith has never paid much attention to this kind of meeting. At most, she only pays attention to the news about the former heroine Isa. After hearing that the former heroine had rebelled and there was no possibility of her coming back, Lilith immediately started to act. After all, Lilith is not a heroine, does not have the favor of a goddess, and does not have much real power after becoming a saint. Lilith did not understand most of what was discussed at the meeting. There were many people attending the meeting, including Lilith's fiancé copyright, the fourth Prince Kellen, who was known as the future hope of the kingdom. He was sitting on the left-hand side of the old king, looking at Lilith infatuatedly. There is also the eldest son of the old king, the eldest Prince Cliff, who is already middle-aged and even starting to go bald. However, the eldest prince came just like Lilith to gather people, and he was even more restless than Lilith in his seat. Because his character was too cowardly and stupid, the old king did not like his eldest son. After Crane showed his amazing talent and courage, Cliff immediately lost his status as crown prince. However, the eldest prince himself had no complaints, and even breathed a sigh of relief. There were no nobles in the kingdom who supported the eldest prince, and the change of crown prince went smoothly. Next, there are some issues regarding the war between the Northern Territory and the demons. With a wave of his hand, the Prime Minister of the kingdom, Kaedik, distributed all the information to everyone participating in the meeting. The meeting was held in the form of a round table, which is a meeting method handed down from the Cape Tien Kingdom, which means that all parties participating in the meeting can have equal dialogue and consultation. The border war in the north has been going on for 5 years. If it continues, there will be no results. Instead, it will drag down the kingdom's finances. As the Prime Minister of the kingdom, I suggest to our noble majesty that we cancel the aid to the north. He also ordered the North Territory and the demons to cease the war. Both sides should sit down and have a good chat for the sake of peace and their respective peoples. After finishing speaking, Kodak also bowed to the king on the main seat, Augustine III, which represented the official start of this issue. Chapter 23. Kodak, I don't agree with you. The first person to object was naturally the Master of the North, Reina's grandfather, Grand Duke Lars. The white-haired and grey-bearded Archduke Lars leaned on the back of his chair and placed his hands naturally on the table. His tall body occupied most of the round table seats like a hill, like a giant bear waiting for prey, exuding a dangerous aura. Although he is over 70 years old, for a high-level professional, this is just a bit old, not an old age. A normal high-level professional, even without considering various secret medicines and magic, can live to be 100 years old. First of all, the kingdom has not provided any assistance to our northern border. As Grand Duke Lars glanced over, some guilty nobles lowered their heads. Not only did the kingdom not provide any assistance to the north, it was even secretly wooing the nobles in the north. Not to mention, some businessmen even knew it. He is secretly selling weapons, salt, and iron to the demons. This is one of the reasons why the northern border, whose territory is almost half the size of the entire kingdom, has been beaten by the demons and can only shrink. Secondly, I don't think compromise can bring peace. Giving concessions to the aggressors will only make them more greedy. Grand Duke Lars's voice was loud, but he didn't get much response. Almost all the nobles sided with the royal family. At worst, they just sat on the wall and watched the scenery. Now the north is not only being invaded by foreign enemies, but their own family is even fighting for the air. In war, weakness can be said to be doomed. The question is just how much weakness. Do you care what the meat on the table says? Although this piece of meat looks a little bit toothless, the bright red blood stains on it make the surrounding nobles. Licking his lips. Kotick did not refute directly, but clapped his hands, and immediately the attendants spread a painting on the conference table. The painting shows a baby and a child who looks to be less than 10 years old. On the ground are two corpses holding weapons. The two soldiers on the painting have the emblem of the Northwind Bear family of the Lars family printed on their armor. The pension was taken away from the hands of some children, and there were many corpses of refugees who had died of starvation around them. Many nobles present began to discuss. Everyone, this is the north under the governance of the Lars family. When I heard the bards telling me, I didn't want to believe it until I saw this magical picture recorded according to the scenes in the north. After saying that, Kotick immediately put on a distressed look and began to speak passionately about the dangers of war. What did the war bring to us? Think about the time of the blood mist turmoil. Almost one-third of the kingdom's elites died in that civil strife. People's livelihoods were in ruins, and rebels continued to form in various regions. In order to describe the scene in the picture more vividly, Kotick recalled how he exploited his serfs, and then continued loudly, in order to survive, these people can even sell their own children. Immediately afterwards, Kotick grafted his behavior of using welfare facilities to bribe, abduct children, and turn these children into harvesters and harvesters on the Lars family. Kotick's tone was sharp, and he slapped his chest with exaggerated body movements. He seemed to be really sad. Some of the women brought by the nobles had already begun to cry and even became scared. After all, the act of harvesting and cutting animals was not allowed in the kingdom. It has always been there, but most nobles don't actually understand these things very well. Of course, there are also many nobles who are very interested in these curious things, and even want to talk to Kotick afterwards. There were also those minor nobles who were not qualified to sit in the seats and could only listen in. They all showed disdainful expressions. Some even wanted to laugh, laughing at the fact that Kotick's time in this industry was too short, and the loopholes in the methods he described. It's full of mistakes and not professional at all. You are just a slanderer. Grand Duke Lars slapped the table and stood up angrily. The magic power around him continued to gather, but in the end, under the warning of the law enforcer and the contempt of the nobles, he had no choice but to dissipate the magic power. There were even many nobles talking quietly, saying that they were indeed a family that taught them the shame of nobility. Sure enough, the upper beam was not straight and the lower beam was crooked. However, after being warned by the eyes of Grand Duke Lars, those nobles immediately fell silent. In the past 2 years, the demon army has been renamed the Demon King Army. It seems that a new king has appeared among the demons. Under the leadership of this king, it has become increasingly difficult for the northern border to resist the invasion of the border demons. Originally, the royal family in the north could coexist peacefully, and even wanted to marry the north's eldest daughter Reina. However, with the disappearance of Reina's father, the royal family's attitude gradually changed from uniting with the north to defend the royal power, to weakening the north to protect the royal power. Because the north has become too weak, it is still unclear who will give blood to whom when there is a real marriage. However, this is just a superficial guess. After the astrologers from the tower visited the old king, his attitude suddenly changed 180 degrees, and he became eager to drive out all the people in the north, even selling the land to unite the demons. Seeing Grand Duke Lars' silence, the atmosphere was almost brewing. Kotick no longer tried to hide it, and changed the subject. However, you don't need to worry. The Demon King's envoy has arrived at the royal capital before and had a long talk with me. The Demon King is no different from us, and is even more serious than we imagined. Peace-loving and approachable. The Demon King also hates war. Speaking of this, Kotick turned his attention to Grand Duke Lars, seemingly mocking Lars for being a warlike person. Therefore, the Demon King hopes that both parties will take a step back and promote peace. I, on behalf of His Majesty the King, have signed a new agreement with the Demon King. Although the details are yet to be discussed, I believe that this agreement will bring great benefits to the Northern Territory and Cape Town. Bring lasting peace to the kingdom and the demons. Although Kotick said so, when copies of the agreement were distributed to the nobles and church representatives at the round table, almost everyone showed expressions of confusion and shock. The land north of the snow-broken territory in the north will be ceded to the demon clan, and the trade between the Northern Territory and the Demon Clan will be completely opened. The Northern Territory will need to provide 300,000 silver leaf coins to the Demon Clan every year, and the Demon Clan will also provide a certain amount of warcraft, furs and minerals. No matter which clause is used, it is too exaggerated. Isn't this just a cessation of territory and compensation? What kind of love for peace does the devil have? Isn't it because the battle in the north is not lively enough? Isn't this clearly a clause of defeat? Many people stared dumbly at the huge figure exuding a dangerous aura, and stepped back unconsciously, as if they were worried that Archduke Lars would attack in the next second. Even church personnel have begun preparing for on-site rescue. The Surti area north of the snow-broken territory is already rich in ores. We ceded these areas, but we still have to buy the ores from these areas from the demons. Grand Duke Lars asked loudly, even feeling a bit angry at this absurd contract. This is just a preliminary agreement. We can still discuss specific matters. But the Demon King must have these places that are rich in ores. The North Territory is rich in resources. I believe it won't hurt if we lose this little territory, right? Kotick was not afraid of Lars, and the ridicule in his tone never stopped. Humph, I hope you won't be eaten by the wolf you fed in the end. After saying this, Grand Duke Lars stood up directly and left the seat. In today's round table meeting, it is no longer important whether or not the Lars family participates. Kotick is not even here to discuss, but to inform. In the game between the royal family and the north, the royal family has promised many benefits. You paid a huge price in exchange for a full-scale siege of the weakened Lars family. Now it's time to close the net. Master Prime Minister, about our Cathedral of Our Lady of Salvation in the north. The people from the Church of Light finally spoke, but they were not against the content of the treaty, but they were asking the Kotick Church in the north what to do. Don't worry, the Demon King's army is a civilized army. I have already communicated with them. They will allow the people from the Cathedral of Our Lady of the Rescue to evacuate safely. Kotick was confident and looked at Augustine III, who had been silent. There was no expression on Augustine III's face as he began to show age spots. He just nodded. Then Kotick continued to preside over the meeting. After Archduke Lars left, Kotick had already started talking to various nobles. Discuss how to carve up the northern territory. Chapter 24. Archduke Lars, who returned to his mansion, drank a whole bottle of wine to stop his hands from shaking. But just as he calmed down, there was a loud noise outside the manor. We want peace, not war. We want peace, not war. A group of students from the royal capital were parading outside Lars Manor holding the magic scroll that Kotick showed at the round table meeting. There were even angry students throwing rubbish at Archduke Lars Manor, cursing loudly, and demanding that the North compromise with the demons for the sake of the common people. When Grand Duke Lars returned to the mansion, the meeting had just ended. So quickly, students from the Royal Capital Academy got the magic scroll and organized people to start a parade at a very fast speed. Reina knew it when she came. Something is wrong. Sir, do you want to drive them away? The butler approached to ask thoughtfully, but Archduke Lars just waved his hand. No need, that will only be counterproductive. At this moment, Grand Duke Lars somewhat hated his extraordinary hearing as a high-level professional. Is it really that you are wrong? The Northern Territory really needs to recuperate now, but it must not compromise with the demons. Grand Duke Lars was somewhat helpless about this treaty. The Northern Territory could no longer withstand the attack of the demons and retreated to the broken snow territory, but it was more conservative than the original retreat plan. The annual silver leaf coins are not something the Lars family cannot afford. If nothing goes wrong in the air war in the past 2 years, and the heir of the Lars family is quickly selected to stabilize people's hearts, maybe the lost land can be regained. Although the nominal heir was obtained based on their respective comprehensive strength and military merit, Grand Duke Lars actually had selfish motives. Lena's younger brother, Sean Lars, is the best candidate in Archduke Lars' mind. Although he is young, he has inherited his father's calmness and determination. The territory is also the richest river valley in the north. It is also home to the largest slave market in the north. It has countless capable ministers and generals. It is a favorite in this war of succession. Of course, the main reason is that Sean is too anthropomorphic compared to his 2 uncles who are connected to the demon clan and the royal family, his extortionate brother, and his young sister. As for Lena, Archduke Lars felt somewhat guilty. Not only did he regard Lena as a tool for marriage, but he also failed to save Lena in the secret fight with the royal family. In the end, it was the saint of the church who did not continue to pursue her. Only then could Reina be safely removed and married to an unknown little nobleman. When he thought of this, Grand Duke Lars took out the letter written by Reina to him in the drawer. This letter was a rare comfort to him. Whenever he sees the letter written by his favorite granddaughter to himself, Grand Duke Lars will forget all his worries and be as happy as a little old man. In addition to simple greetings, the letter mainly described some interesting things that happened in grey-collar workers. For example, the young aristocrat named Linde invented a strange device called a bicycle, which can propel 2 people by just pedaling. Go forward on wheels. Grand Duke Lars felt it was a bit ridiculous. According to the drawings drawn by Reina, how could this device not fall over? Furthermore, this kind of bicycle needs a smooth road surface and is not suitable for driving on rough roads. But as a small toy, it's quite interesting. In addition to the bicycle, there is also the hydraulic forging hammer invented by Reina herself. However, when this letter was sent, the grey and white collar hydraulic forging hammer had not been officially completed, so the letter only had a rough sketch. Grand Duke Lars took a closer look and didn't pay too much attention. After all, although this hydraulic forging hammer can indeed improve the quality of equipment, Grand Duke Lars still believes that what really determines the outcome on the battlefield is how many professionals both sides have. The hydraulic forging hammer is just a large toy. Originally, Archduke Lars' position for Linde was to live her life without any disasters. When he saw his grandson-in-law making toys for his granddaughter every day, he didn't feel that he was despondent with toys. Instead, he affirmed the results of Linde's work. Linde makes her happy, that is more important than anything else. Although the spies next to Reina reported that the little noble named Linde had almost total power in the territory, all matters in the territory were handled by Linde and his people, and even the head maid Lila rebelled. But when he saw that Linde would pull Reina into the tent every night and tell in detail what happened in the territory today and the policies implemented in the territory, Grand Duke Lars felt relieved. Judging from the report, my granddaughter, who still wants to return to the royal capital and ask the royal family to help her get justice, will definitely not be able to defeat the little nobleman named Linde, but no matter what the reason is, the little nobleman has maintained his loyalty to Lei. It was enough to earn Reina's respect and make Reina happy. It even exceeded Archduke Lars' expectations. Grand Duke Lars was not afraid that Linde would completely take over the power of the territory. Instead, he was afraid that his grandson-in-law would be too weak and be led by Reina, which would eventually lead Reina to do something irrational. If he really wanted Reina to manage the territory, Grand Duke Lars would have made it clear in the marriage contract. As for the management and policies of grey-collar workers, Grand Duke Lars doesn't care. It's just a small place. If Linde does whatever he wants, the Lars family can maintain this territory for a lifetime. At the end of reading the letter, Reina asked herself to send more craftsmen and magic apprentices to the grey-collar workers to make toys, and even transport less luxury goods in exchange. Archduke Lars tapped the book table with his fingers. This was obviously written by the little nobleman named Linde who asked Reina to write it. The territory had just started and it really needed craftsmen and magic apprentices more. But Grand Duke Lars's initial positioning of grey collar was to build a paradise for Linde. Do we really need so many craftsmen and magic apprentices? However, seeing Reina showing off the new toy Linde made for her in the letter, Archduke Lars smiled easily. At least his granddaughter does hope to have more craftsmen and magic apprentices, which is enough. Choose a group of idle craftsmen apprentices, recruit some unwanted magic apprentices in the capital, and then send them to the grey and white collars. After Grand Duke Lars finished speaking, the butler who was standing by left immediately. This is not because Grand Duke Lars is stingy and unwilling to support grey-collar workers, but because making toys does not require high-level craftsmen and magic apprentices. This is also a punishment for the grandson-in-law who likes to play tricks. He is warned not to think that just because he can make Reina happy, he can make whatever demands he wants from the Lars family. At least that's what Archduke Lars thinks. Now. Chapter 25. On the other side, Lilith, who was wandering in the world, finally came back to her senses under the gentle reminder of the fourth Prince Kellen. Your Highness, I'm sorry, I'm just a little. These meetings are really not interesting. Just seeing old Lars' livid face makes me happy. Crane interrupted Lilith's speech rudely. Although he had good intentions, Lilith still felt a little unhappy. As long as Kaldek can negotiate this treaty, peace in the north and the kingdom will not be far away. How about holding a dance party tonight to celebrate? Hearing that Crane was going to hold another dance party, Lilith waved her hands quickly. Your Highness, your sister Claire has made an appointment with me tonight. I'm sorry that I can't attend the dance. After saying that, Lilith hurriedly left with the maids. Looking at Lilith's leaving figure, Crane hummed softly, Woman, you are still so interesting. Lilith said that Claire was not rejecting her appointment. After all, Lilith was able to rise to the top because of Claire, the most beloved little princess of Crane and Augustine III. Don't worry about it. My brother is like this. He has dance parties 6 days out of 7 days a week. Just get used to it. Claire gently sipped the black tea in her hand to comfort Lilith. And if there isn't a dance every day, how can you get to know my brother? But it's too frequent, 6 times a week, who can stand it? Lilith sat loosely on the chair. This was a women's meeting organized by Claire, and it was one of the few social activities where Lilith could relax. By the way, what do you think of the treaty that the Prime Minister and the Demon King discussed? Claire put down the teacup and asked Lilith. We want to talk about business now. Lilith looked at Claire speechlessly. She came to Claire to escape, so Claire also wanted to talk about business. Lilith actually despises that treaty. How does it look like an appeasement treaty? Can peace really be achieved by giving up some areas in the north? What's more, there are many mining areas, which the demons may easily digest. The war will continue after a while. But there was no way. Lilith was sitting on the side of the royal family, so she could only shout, ah, yes, yes, yes. Before Lilith could start to speak, a woman with long black hair and an imposing manner on the side said, Lord Kodak is right, the Lars family is a bunch of rubbish, and there was a shameful lay before. Forget it, the northern territory is still in a mess. The only way to solve the problem is to make peace with the demons and oust the Lars family. Lilith looked up and saw that it was Caroline, the new student president of the Royal Capital Academy of Magic, a loyal supporter of Kodak, and she was the one who led the parade to Lars Manor today. After that, we will go to the north to interrogate the Lars family in person. Lady Saint, do you want to come with us? You. Lilith looked at Caroline and Claire in confusion. That's right, Lord Kodak will leave for the front line to negotiate with Lord Demon King soon, and we plan to drop by the Grey Collar where Reina is to see how she is doing. Claire pursed her lips and chuckled, nothing could make people feel more happy than seeing Reina in miserable condition. Do you want to come with me? Lilith. Facing Claire's invitation, Lilith hesitated for a moment and then refused. Forget it, it's better to stay and attend the dance than to let me go out. Lilith was a homebody in her previous life. When she arrived in another world, she had already cleared the game and still had to run around. Wouldn't that mean traveling in vain and also completing the level in vain? At the same time, the eldest prince and former crown prince Cliff Augustine, who had finished the royal meeting, was sitting stiffly in the corner of the ball. This was the ball of the fourth Prince Crane Augustine, and Cliff had agreed to come to support it today. Originally, they thought it would be a happy and relaxing dance scene as usual, but no one expected that King Augustine III would also attend the dance. After Augustine III chatted with his crown prince, he sat next to Cliff, which made Cliff, who had always been timid and cowardly, afraid to speak out. As the king waved, the guards pushed back the surrounding nobles, leaving enough space for the father and son. In today's meeting, I saw that you seemed to have something to say. Although Augustine III was old, no detail at the meeting could escape his eyes. No, I don't dare. How could I have anything to say? Father, you know that I have no other thoughts for a long time. Cliff awkwardly rubbed his hands that had nowhere to rest, and big beads of sweat fell from his face. Do you also think that we have persecuted the northern border too much? Augustine Ii's voice was still as majestic as Cliff's memory. Cliff knew that when his father talked to him in this tone, he could no longer lie. Yes, it is a little bit. Father, the land area of the northern border already accounts for more than 1/3 of the entire kingdom, and it is almost half of it. What if we are pressed hard? Augustine III nodded and replied, there are many people in the royal capital who have your idea. In their view, the demons invaded us, and we should support the northern border to fight back. But Cliff, you know, when did you see anything in the Holy Grail brought by the Tower? The Tower is the most mysterious, noble, and wise professional organization in the world. Its founding date is almost unknown. For thousands of years, it has always maintained a neutral attitude towards secular things. It seems that it only has something to do with magic. Only new discoveries can arouse their interest. The Holy Grail is an artifact used by the astrologers in the Tower to predict the future and spy on the secrets of heaven. So far, the predictions made by the Holy Grail have been fulfilled perfectly. This is not a legend, but a real history. I saw the kingdom fall at your hands. As soon as these words came out, Cliff's dress was soaked in cold sweat. So it turned out that his father was looking at his future after he succeeded to the throne? No wonder after the astrologers from the Tower came, his father immediately dismissed him. He was replaced by the fourth brother who was more prestigious and smarter. Cliff felt that he had figured it out, but Augustine Ii's words did not stop. I saw an army waving the flag of the North Wind Bear entering the royal capital, and you, who was already the king at the time, took the initiative to take off the crown soon after and abdicated the throne to the Lars family. Although I didn't watch it, I don't know what that person looks like, but he is surrounded by senior members of the Lars family. At this point, Augustine III coughed angrily, but immediately regained his composure and asked, so Cliff, my son, do you still have any complaints about you losing your position as crown prince? No, father, absolutely. I will always support my fourth brother. Even if you exile me now, I have no objection. Cliff was so frightened that he almost knelt down and kowtowed. He didn't expect that the Lars family would rebel against him in the future, and he would actually abdicate. No wonder his father directly changed the throne after receiving the astrologer from the Tower. The smart fourth brother is almost crazy about suppressing the Lars family, even using dirty methods. Humph, that's good if you know. After saying this, Augustine III stood up and left. In fact, Augustine III really wanted this cowardly eldest son to inherit the throne. To put it bluntly, it is called cowardice, but to put it nicely, he knows how to compromise and balance. In the kingdom, in a period of stable development, this kind of personality is not only the most suitable, but also the one that can best stabilize the bottom line. In fact, in terms of balancing the interests of all parties, the fourth Prince Kellen is not as good as his elder brother, so the fourth prince holds dance parties every day to improve his communication skills and understand the needs of various nobles. What's more, Cliff is just a little cowardly, but not stupid. But it is a pity that Augustine III saw the future of the kingdom's destruction. In order to change this future, Augustine III could even sell his country to the demons. As long as Augustine's rule can last forever, the rest is not important. Even the outrageous things that Chaldec did, Augustine III pretended not to have seen them. No matter how loud the cries from the bottom were, Augustine III would only look back in confusion and say, common people? No concern. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel so you are notified of future uploads. You can find the next parts in the playlist visible on the screen or on my channel. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.